For 30 years he designed fishing systems. Now he has a dead leg, a dying sister, and a blue glowing scroll before his eyes that promises 100 fish with a single cast of the net. The problem is that there are only a few hours left until sunset, and in the evening, the debt collector will come. The first thing he feels is pain. His right leg feels as if it's been doused with boiling water. He inhales, and along with the air, the smell of fish oil and burnt grass enters his lungs. This isn't a hospital, not the hospital in Busan. Above him is a ceiling made of pressed seaweed and clay. A beetle crawls up the wall. Someone places a wet rag on his forehead that smells of mud. He blinks, and a face hovers over him. A girl, 12 or 13 years old. Her lips are chapped and bleeding. Her eyes shine like those of someone with a high fever. She whispers that he has returned, that she thought he'd leave too, just like Mom. And she starts coughing. The cough tears at her little body like a rag. Pink foam swells at the corner of her lips. He doesn't know who she is, doesn't know where he is, but his hands are already moving on their own. Fingers wipe the foam from her lips. A palm rests on her forehead. Hot. Very hot. And then it hits him. Not a thought, not a memory. An entire stranger's life flashes by from beginning to end in 3 heartbeats. His name is Doyeon, 24 years old. The village of Tulfo on the eastern shore of Malgyun Island, the Haegyeong archipelago. His father drowned last winter. His mother died of whooping cough in the spring. 6 months ago, a snapped fishing line shattered his right leg below the knee. The bone healed crooked. His leg is dead. He can only walk with a crutch. And the girl in front of him is his sister, Han Songhwa, 13 years old, and she has the same cough that killed their mother. He lies on a mat and stares at the seaweed-covered ceiling. And he thinks, this is a dream, that he'll wake up soon in the cold water by the pier in Busan, and someone will reach out and say everything's fine. But the dream doesn't end. His leg hurts. The girl next to him is breathing shallowly and heavily. And he decides. Fine, let's say he's Han Doyeon now. A cripple with a dead leg and a dying sister. In a world where taxes are paid with dried fish and he can't even lift a net. Fine. For 30 years he designed fishing systems. He spent 10 on ships in the East China Sea. He knows the migration maps of the 6 seas by heart. He knows every knot in net invented by man over the past 500 years. And he has 2 working hands. He tries to sit down. His body won't obey him. His muscles are like wet rope. He tries again. Songhwa holds him by the shoulder with her slender fingers. And in that moment, a blue, translucent scroll unfolds before his eyes. 1 line. System link activated. The golden network. He reads it twice, closes his eyes, opens them. The scroll hangs before him like a projection on glass. Sonka cannot see it. He touches the scroll with his mind and it unfolds wider. Cast. Once a day. From sunrise to sunset. The target is specified mentally or aloud with utmost precision. The more precise the description, the more precise the catch. A maximum of 100 units per cast. A physical cast with one's own hands is required. Deception of intent nullifies the result. He sits and reads these lines and his pulse begins to slow for the first time. Because he has understood. This is no accident. This is a tool. And he understands tools better than anyone in the world. Sonka asks if everything is all right. He replies that it's fine. He tells her to lie down and rest. She shakes her head and says that the guild collector will come this evening. 8 bundles of dried fish, the debt for the nets and the spot at the pier. If they don't pay, they'll take the house. Or they'll take her to settle the debt. She says this calmly, like children who've already gotten used to the world treating them this way. He looks at her thin hands, at her sunken cheeks, at the pink foam gathering again at the corner of her lips, and he decides. No one is taking anyone away from here. He asks where the crutch is. Sanwa points to the wall. There is a rough crutch made from a fin washed up by the sea. He rolls onto his side and pulls himself up on his hands. He stands up. His leg explodes with pain. He grits his teeth. He plants the crutch into the earthen floor. 2 steps to the door. He takes them and steps outside. The light stings his eyes, and the village of Tolfo opens up before him like a wound. A dozen houses made of stone and dried seaweed. Half of them are empty. The roofs have caved in. On the shore, overturned boats with broken bottoms. 3 women are mending nets by a nearby house. An old man sits on a rock and stares into the water. 2 children play with a dead crab. That is the whole village. The 3rd year of the silent famine, the big schools of fish have gone south. The port is empty. There are fewer and fewer people. He limps toward the pier. Every step reverberates in his leg, a white flash. The planks creak and bend. He reaches the edge and sits down on a pile. He lowers his legs. His right leg dangles as if it were someone else's. The sea is gray and calm. And then he does what he did 1,000 times in his past life. He closes his eyes and reads the water. Before his inner gaze, the sea becomes transparent, like on a sonar screen. He sees the temperature layers. A cold current is flowing from the northwest. At a depth of 10 meters, the water is 4 degrees colder. At 20 meters, the thermocline begins. And there, between the warm and cold layers, at a depth of 3 meters, 60 paces from the pier, stands a school. Silver sardines, 200 or 300, small but dense. The fish aren't feeding. They're just standing in the current. According to local lore, the silver sardines come only to the lucky ones. They haven't been caught here for 3 years. He opens his eyes, looks at his hands. Calluses on a stranger's body. Cuts from the ropes. His palms are broad and strong. A fisherman's hands. He turns around. A torn net lies by the house. He shouts for Sanwei to bring it. A minute later, she appears in the doorway dragging a bundle of ropes. She coughs. He tells her to drop the net and go inside. She leaves. He crawls over to the net and begins to untangle it. His hands move on their own. Half of the mesh is torn. The weave is coarse. The reed fibers aren't tarred. You'd catch nothing but jellyfish with a net like this. But the system doesn't require a good net, just a physical cast. He spreads out what he has, an uneven square 2 by 2 meters. It'll be enough for 100 sardines. He drags the net along the pier to the edge. He sits down. He estimates. 60 steps. That's a lot. But if he throws it with all his body weight and momentum, it's doable. His left hand is his working hand. His right one, too. He doesn't need his legs. He sits. He folds the net into loops on his left knee. He grabs the edge with his right hand. With his left, he grabs the sinker, a dirty stone on a line. He mentally states the conditions. Silver sardines, sexually mature individuals, no younger than 2 years old. Depth, 3 meters. A radius of 60 paces. 100 fish. He takes a swing and casts. The cast is off target. The net veers left and splashes onto the water in a shapeless lump. Any fisherman would shake his head, but the net touches the water and sinks. And 3 seconds later, the water beneath the pier boils with silver. He grips the end of the rope. The tug nearly pulls him off the pier. He plants his left foot against the plank and pulls. The net is heavy. The rope cuts into his palms. His shoulder creaks. He pulls. A shimmering silver cloud rises from the water. 100 fish. Exactly 100. The sardines thrash and leap. Their scales catch the setting sun and flash like coins. The net crashes onto the planks. The fish scatter across the wet wood. He sits, breathing heavily, and watches. 100 silver sardines, each the size of a palm. Each the same size. Each alive. She hadn't seen a catch like this in 3 years. He turns around. 3 women stand frozen by the house, their mouths agape. The old man gets up from the rock for the first time. The children drop the crab and run toward the pier, and Sonhwa stands in the doorway. She isn't coughing. She looks at the silver scattered across the planks and smiles, for the first time in a month. He gathers the fish into 2 bags under the pier. He sets 20 aside. 10 for Sonhwa. 10 for his neighbor Auntie Yoon and her 2 grandsons, who, as far as the old Doyeon could recall, hadn't eaten properly in a week. He sorts the remaining 80 by size. Fresh silver sardines are 3 times more expensive than dried ones. 8-10 fresh ones is about 24 bundles by dry weight. He owes 8 bundles, so he's in the black. He carries 10 fish to Aunt Yoon. She backs away. She looks at him as if he were a ghost, then at the fish. Then she grabs one and presses it to her chest like a child. Her grandsons peek out from behind the door. Their eyes are big and hungry. He tells them to eat. He returns home. Sonhwa has already lit the fire. He cleans the fish. His hands remember how. Not his hands. Doyeon's hands. He guts the sardines, rinses them in seawater, skewers them on sticks and places them over the fire. 10 minutes later, the room fills with the smell of grilled fish. Sonhwa sits by the fire and stares at the skewers as if witnessing a miracle. He hands her the first one ready. She takes it with both hands, takes a bite, closes her eyes, and tears stream down the cheeks of the 13-year-old girl. She eats and cries, and he sits beside her, waiting for her to finish. Because there's nothing else he can do for now. But for now, this is enough. In the evening, the collector arrives, a burly man with a red face and a greasy debt ledger. His name is Kwon. He walks in without knocking. He looks at Doyeon with her legs stretched out, lifeless. At Sonhwa on the mat. He smirks. The debt is 8 bundles. Today is the last day. If there are no bundles, he'll take the girl. In the capital, they give 15 bundles for a healthy one. For a sick one, at least 5. It's still a good deal. Doyeon nods toward the sacks by the wall. Kwon opens one, sees the fish, counts them again, takes one out, holds it up to the light. A silver sardine. Fresh. Perfect. Turns to Doyeon, asks where he got it. Doyeon says he caught it. Kwon laughs, then looks at the dead leg, at the pier outside the window, at the sea, and stops laughing. Stands there for a long time, then slams the book shut and says the debt is settled. Turns around and walks out. Sonhwa exhales. Doyeon closes his eyes. 1 day has passed. The debt is settled. His sister has eaten. The system is working. And tomorrow he'll really get started. He woke up before dawn. His body ached as if he'd been beaten with sticks. Every muscle throbbed from yesterday's sprint. His right leg pulsed with a dull ache, as always. Sunhwa was sleeping beside him. Her breathing was heavy and wheezing. He lay there and listened. In his past life, he had heard that sound once before. It was a dock worker in Busan who had been taken away in an ambulance. He never came back. So he needed a doctor, and he needed medicine, and for that, he needed money. And money here is fish. He got up quietly. He took his crutch. He went out onto the street. The sky was gray. Dawn had not yet begun, but the horizon was already lightening. The air smelled of salt and cold. He hobbled to the pier and sat on the edge. He closed his eyes. He read the water. The sea was empty. The night currents had shifted, and the school of sardines had moved south. But at a depth of 7 meters, 200 paces from the shore, he saw something else. Dark, long silhouettes. A school of 40 or 50 fish. By their body shape and the depth at which they were swimming, he identified them as red sea bream. Sea bream. Red. An expensive fish. In Busan, a kilogram of red sea bream cost more than a kilogram of beef. It surely wasn't cheap here either. But 200 steps. That's far. He couldn't throw a stone from the pier. He needed a boat. He turned around. Upside-down boats lay on the shore. He hobbled over to the nearest one. An old, flat-bottomed boat. Planking made of thick boards fastened with wooden nails. The bottom was rotten. 3 cracks a finger's width thick. He walked around it. The second boat. Even worse. The third. The side was broken through. The fourth. He stopped. This one was slightly better. Small. For one person. The bottom was intact. One plank in the side was cracked, but not all the way through. If he caulked the cracks with resin and seaweed, it would hold. He looked around. On the shore, by one of the houses, stood a barrel of black resin for nets. He hobbled over to the barrel. He scooped some resin onto a piece of bark. He returned to the boat. He began to caulk it. He worked slowly. His knee pressed into the sand, and his dead leg lay to one side. His hands did the familiar work. He caulked every crack. Then he gathered some wet seaweed and stuffed it into the crack in the side. Another layer of tar on top. By the time the sun appeared above the horizon, the boat was ready. He turned it over, dragged it to the water. It was hard work. His crutch got stuck in the wet sand. He fell twice. The third time, he simply sat down and pushed the boat with his foot. His left one. The living one. The boat slid into the water. He climbed inside, hoisting his dead leg over the side. It was leaking, but only slightly. It would last about 40 minutes. He picked up the oar lying under the pier and began to row. 100 strokes. 200. He stopped, closed his eyes, read the water again. A school of pike was right beneath him. 43 fish, average weight about 1.5 pounds each. Depth 7 meters. He spread out the net, the same torn one. He cast it. The net sank. And again, after a few seconds, the rope tightened so much that the boat rocked. He pulled. His arms were on fire. His back was creaking. The boat took on water. He shifted his weight to the port side and kept pulling. The net came out of the water, heavy and alive. He hauled it over the side. The boat sank lower. Water poured in through the cracks faster. He started rowing toward the shore. Every stroke was harder than the last. The water at the bottom of the boat was rising. By the time the bow hit the sand, The water was ankle deep. He tumbled out of the boat and dragged the net onto the shore. He unfolded it. Red sea bream. 43 of them. Each fish the size of a forearm. The scales were red-pink with a golden sheen. He knelt on one knee in the wet sand and looked at the catch. 43, not 100. The system had given exactly as many as there were in the school. He had asked for 100, but there were 43 in the school. So the system doesn't create fish. It catches what's there. That's important. He remembered. Aunt Yoon came ashore. She saw the fish. She stopped. She came closer. She looked. Then she looked up at Doyeon. She asked where the red bream came from. She said there hadn't been any off the coast of Tulfo for 10 years. He replied that he'd found a school 200 paces from the shore. She looked at him with a long, strange gaze. Then she said quietly that his late father also knew how to find fish where others couldn't see them. And she went home. He divided the catch. He left 10 bream for Songhua and himself. He took 3 to Aunt Yoon. He gave 5 to Grandpa Pak. The old man didn't want to take them. He stood by his rock and turned away. He muttered that it wasn't right to accept anything from a cripple. Doyeon placed the fish on the rock and left. 10 minutes later, he turned around. Grandpa Park was gone. So were the fish. 25 bream remained. He laid them out on a mat by the house. He needed a buyer, or someone to trade with. In the memories of the former Doyeon, he found a name. The merchant O Chang Ho from the neighboring village of Hwari. He came once every 3 days on a donkey with a cart. He bought up fish for the county market. He paid little. But there were no other options. He asked Aunt Yoon when the next visit would be. She said tomorrow. Fine. He went home. San Hua woke up. She was coughing. He cooked her some bream. He cleaned it, skinned it. The flesh of red bream is tender and clean, almost boneless. You couldn't ask for a better fish for a sore throat. He boiled a piece in seawater. It made a broth, thick and white. He gave it to Songhua. She drank it in small sips. She said it was delicious. Then she asked where the bream came from. He said he'd caught it. She looked at him and said he was lying, that bream costs money, that he must have traded for it. He said he'd caught it himself that morning. She said nothing, finished the broth, lay down. He covered her with a blanket, a thin one made of something like hemp. It was cold in the house. The walls let the wind through. It needed fixing. The roof needs replacing. His sister needs medicine. They need money. There's too much they need. He sat down by the wall and began to think. In the engineer's mind, the problem sorted itself out. Resources. 1 ability. 1 cast per day. A maximum of 100 fish. Limitations. A physical cast. He needs a boat. He needs a net. The current net is disposable. Every cast tears it even more. In 3 days, it will fall apart. Demand. The village is starving. But the village is poor. You can't sell here. Need access to the market. Merchant O Chang Ho. The county seat. Maybe further. 1 priority. Medicine for Songhua. He rummaged through others' memories. Salt cough. A disease of the coastal poor. Treated with a decoction of the bark of the moyan tree, which grows only on the southern islands. The cost of 1 dose is 3 bundles of dried fish. The course of treatment is 20 doses, 60 bundles. That's 600 medium-sized dried fish. Or 200 red bream in fresh terms. He rubbed his face with his hands. 200 bream. At 43 a day, that's 5 days at best. But the school won't stay put. There might be no bream tomorrow. Maybe something cheaper. Or nothing. All right, one step at a time. Tomorrow, the merchant. The day after tomorrow, back to sea. He closed his eyes and fell asleep sitting against the wall with his crutch across his knees. The next day, the merchant O Chang Ho arrived around noon. A skinny man on a skinny donkey with a skinny cart. He had gone around 3 villages along the coast and bought up whatever was left. In the last year, he had traveled almost for nothing. Doyeon went out to meet him. He laid out 25 red bream on a cloth. Chang Ho stopped the donkey. He dismounted. He approached. He looked at the fish, then at Doyeon, then back at the fish. He crouched down, felt them, sniffed them, lifted one bream by the tail. The fish glinted in the sun. Chang Ho asked where he'd gotten them. Doyeon said he'd caught them. Chang Ho said there hadn't been any red bream in these waters for 10 years. Doyeon said nothing. Chang Ho stood there, thought, offered 1 copper coin per fish. Doyeon knew from others' stories that this was 3 times below market price. He said no. He said 2 copper coins per fish. Chang Ho laughed. He offered 1.5. Doyeon agreed. 37.5 copper coins. He handed over the fish. Chang Ho loaded them into the cart. Before leave, he turned around and asked if there would be more. Doyeon said there would be. Chang Ho nodded. He drove off. 37 coins. Doyeon stood there holding them in his hand. Heavy. Tarnished. 1 dose of medicine costs 3 bundles. 3 bundles is 30 fish. 30 fresh sardines cost about 5 copper coins. Red bream is more expensive. So 37 coins is about 7 doses, out of the 20 he needs. 1/3 of the treatment 1 day. But the medicine could only be bought in the county town, and it was a day's journey away. He returned to the house. Sonhwa was asleep. He put the coins in a clay pot and hid it behind the mat. He went outside. He walked over to the torn net. He crouched down. He unfolded it. It was in terrible condition. 1 more cast and it would fall apart. He needed a new net, or to repair this one. But there was nothing to repair it with. The reed fiber they used to weave here rotted in a week in salt water. In his engineer's memory were hundreds of weaving patterns, knots that held a ton of tuna, meshes that didn't tear for 5 seasons. But he needed material for them. Hemp, or silk, or at least cotton. He looked around. Scraps of rope lay on the shore, pieces of old nets, shards of tackle, trash to the locals. He stood up and went to gather them. For 3 hours he crawled along the shore, gathering every piece of rope, every scrap, every single fiber. He brought it all back to the house and began sorting it. Hemp, reed, something resembling flax, and several pieces of something stiff and durable that he didn't recognize. He pulled on it. It didn't tear. He rubbed it. It didn't get soggy. He sniffed it. It smelled of the sea. It was the tendon of some large sea creature, a whale or a large ray. The locals had thrown it away because it was hard to weave with. The knots wouldn't hold. But he knew a knot that would hold on anything. A double fisherman's knot, with a loop that he himself had developed for trawl systems in Busan. Patent number 247 from the year 2019. He smiled. The patent doesn't work here, but the knot works. He began to weave. His fingers moved quickly. They sorted through the fibers, tied them, tightened them. The first 3 knots came out crooked. His fingers wouldn't obey him. A foreign body, foreign muscle memory. But by the 10th knot, his hands had gotten used to it. By the 20th, it was going smoothly. By the 40th, he wasn't thinking about his fingers anymore. They were working on their own. By evening, he had a square measuring 1.5 by 1.5 meters. A small net, but sturdy. He pulled it in different directions. It didn't tear. He threw it into a bucket of seawater. He waited an hour. Pulled it out. The knots held. The mesh was even. He made weights out of stones tied with rope. Not pretty, but it worked. He hung the net on the wall of the house to dry. Songfa came out. She saw the net. She touched it. She looked at her brother. She said it was a strange net, that she had never seen knots like that before. He replied that he had learned from a certain man. She asked who. He said from a very clever engineer. She didn't understand the word engineer. He said from a master craftsman. She nodded and walked away, coughing. He stood there and looked out at the sea. Tomorrow is the 3rd day. He needs another good catch. Then he needs to find a way to get to the county town for medicine. Then he needs to fix the house. Then he needs to fix the pier. Then he needs to build a proper boat. The list is endless. But he has his hands, and he knows what to do. On the 4th day, he saw the Suryeon spirit for the first time. The morning was quiet. The fog lay so thick on the water that the shore was invisible 10 paces away. Doyeon sat in the boat, which he had coated with resin again, and rowed toward the casting spot. The new net lay across his knees, lightweight, sturdy. He closed his eyes and read the water. Nothing. Empty. Not a single school within a 200-step radius. The red bream had left overnight. The sardines had moved south. Small fry like gobies were near the bottom, but no one bought them here. He opened his eyes, sat for a while, thought. In his past life he knew this happened. The sea isn't a supermarket. Fish go where they want. He needed to change spots. He began rowing along the shore, 200 paces north. Stop. Reading the water. Nothing. Another 200 strokes. Still nothing. More. His arms were already burning from the oars. His right leg braced against the gunwale and ached with every stroke. He had rowed nearly half a kilometer from Tulfo when he finally saw them. Deep down, 20 meters, almost at the bottom. A single large fish. No, not 1, 3. Big, dark, slow. He looked closer. The visual system showed their body temperature. Cold-blooded, elongated shape, long dorsal fin, large mouth. He recognized them. Grouper. Rockfish. Here, at a depth of 20 meters, stood 3 giant groupers, each weighing nearly 30 kilograms. In Seoul restaurants, such fish cost a fortune. But 20 meters deep, his net wouldn't reach them. A physical cast means the net has to reach the fish, and 20 meters down isn't 60 steps on the surface. He needed a weight, a heavy one. He looked around. There was only 1 stone weight in the boat. Not enough. He turned the boat around and rowed back to shore. On a rocky stretch, he gathered 5 large stones. He tied them together with a rope. He attached them to the bottom edge of the net. He returned to the spot. He estimated 3 groupers. He silently stated the conditions. Stone bass, adults, no younger than 5 years old, a depth of 20 meters, a radius of 10 steps from the spot. 3 of them. He took a swing and cast the net overboard. The rocks dragged it down instantly. The rope whistled as it disappeared into the water over the side. He clung on. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. A tug. The boat jerked so hard he nearly flew out. The bow went underwater. He leaned on the stern. The boat leveled out. He began to pull. 30 kilograms at the end of the rope. No, not 30. 90. 3 fish at 30 each. His arms wouldn't hold out. He wrapped the rope around the oarlock. He started pulling with his whole body. His back, his shoulders, his abs. Every meter of rope came at the cost of his muscles screaming. The water beneath the boat churned. He pulled for 5 minutes. The first grouper emerged from the water. Huge, dark brown with spots, a mouth the size of a child's head. He hoisted it over the side. The boat dipped a foot. The second, even heavier. The boat was taking on water. The third one wouldn't fit. He realized that immediately. If he hauled in the third one, the boat would sink. He faced a choice: leave the third one behind or take a risk. He chose to take the risk. He tied the third one to the outside of the boat with a rope so that it would swim alongside in the water, and he began rowing toward the shore. The boat moved with great difficulty. Low. Waves were washing over the side. He rowed with one hand and scooped water out with the other. His right foot slipped and struck the side. Pain flared white. He clenched his teeth and kept rowing. And then he saw it. In the fog ahead of the boat, on the water, something was glowing. A pale bluish light. He blinked. It didn't disappear. The glow moved in front of his boat, as if something were leading him to shore. He looked closer. There was a shape in the glow. A fish. A big one. Transparent. Made of light and water. It swam right in front of him, and the light from it fell on the fog and showed the way. A Suryan spirit. He remembered from others' memories. Spirits of the sea. They live in the depths. They help honest fishermen. They punish the greedy. This spirit was leading him to the shore. He rowed after it. 3 minutes later, the bow of the boat touched the sand. The glow disappeared. The fog began to lift. He sat in the boat knee-deep in water with 2 giant fish on the bottom and one tied to the side, breathing heavily. The spirit had helped him. Why? He didn't know, but he remembered. It took half an hour to haul the 3 groupers ashore. Each fish was as tall as he was. He laid them out on the sand and stood over them, leaning on his crutch. 3 stone bass, a total weight of nearly 90 kilograms. In monetary terms, that was 10 times more than his entire catch from yesterday. If the merchant Chang Ho offers a good price, just one of these fish would be enough to cover a month's worth of medicine for Songhua. But Chang Ho won't arrive until tomorrow, and grouper spoils quickly. He needs to preserve it. He remembered. Salt. Seawater. Gutting immediately after catching. He gutted all 3 right on the shore. He threw the innards into the water. He rinsed the cavities with seawater. He rubbed them generously with salt from a bag he found in the house. He stacked them in the shade under an overturned boat, covering them with wet seaweed. In the cold and salt, they'll last a day. By the time he finished, half the village was standing on the shore. 3 women, Grandpa Pak, Auntie Yoon with her grandchildren, and 2 more men he hadn't seen before. Everyone stared at him in silence. Then Grandpa Pak approached. He looked at the boat, at the wet net, at the empty shore where 3 giant groupers had just been lying, and he said that Doyeon would anger the Doyeon spirits, that cripples never make catches like this, that it was the work of demons. Doyeon looked at the old man. He wanted to say that the Doyeon spirit had just led him to the shore through the fog, but he didn't say it. He kept quiet. Grandfather Pak spat on the sand and went back to his hut. Aunt Yoon waited until he was gone. She came closer. She quietly asked if he could mend her net. Her net hadn't caught anything in a month. She and her 2 grandchildren were living on seaweed and crabs. He said he would mend it. She left and returned a minute later with the net. It was small, even worse than his first one. The reed fibers had rotted down to tatters. He took it. He spread it out. He looked at it. It would be faster to throw it away and weave a new one than to repair it. But he didn't have enough material for 2 nets. He began to take it apart. He threw out the rotten parts. He inserted pieces of sinew. He retied the knots, with his own knots, the ones that don't come undone. He worked for 2 hours. Aunt Yoon sat nearby and watched. She said nothing. When he finished and handed the net back to her, she took it and pulled. The net didn't break. She pulled harder. The knots held. She looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. She said that if her husband were alive, he would have bowed to him. And she walked away, clutching the net to her chest. Doyeon sat on the sand and thought that one repaired net didn't change anything. Auntie Yoon wouldn't catch much anyway. She doesn't know where the fish are. She doesn't know when to cast. She needs to know the spot. He can't fish for everyone. He has 1 cast a day, but he can show her where the fish are. Tomorrow he'll try. That evening, he prepared a piece of grouper for Sonwa. White, firm flesh. He cooked it with seaweed and wild herbs he'd found on the hillside above the village. It turned into a thick soup. Sonwa ate greedily. Then she leaned back and said it was the most delicious meal of her life. He smiled. She looked at him and said he had changed, that he didn't used to smile, that he used to just lie there and stare at the ceiling. He didn't know what to say. He said he'd just gotten some sleep. She didn't believe him, but she said nothing. That night he lay awake, listening to her breathing. The wheezing had grown a little quieter, or so it seemed to him. He needed medicine. Tomorrow, the merchant. Sell the groupers. Ask Chang Ho where to buy moyun bark in the county town. Then find a way to get there. A day's journey by donkey or 2 on foot. With his leg, 2 on foot means 4, so he needs a donkey, or a fellow traveler with a cart. He thought and planned until he fell asleep. The merchant Chang Ho arrived at dawn, earlier than usual. The donkey was trotting, which, according to Aunt Yoon, had never happened before. Chang Ho jumped off the cart before it even stopped. He ran up to Doyeon, who was sitting by the overturned boat. He said that yesterday at the county market his bream had sold out in an hour, that the merchants had fought over the last 2, that he'd been offered a standing order. And then he saw 3 groupers laid out on the wet seaweed. He fell silent. He crouched down. He touched them. He turned one over, looked at the gills. Clean. Red. Sniffed. Fresh. He He stood up, took off his hat, put it back on, took it off again. He said that in the capital, they give a silver coin for a grouper like this. 1 fish, a silver coin. 3 fish, 3 silver coins. A silver coin is worth 100 copper coins. 3 silver coins is 300 copper coins. Doyeon did the math in his head. 1 dose of medicine is about 5 copper coins. 300 coins is 60 doses. The rate is 20. So 3 silver coins is 3 full courses of treatment, with some to spare. But Chang Ho won't pay the capital's price. He's a middleman. His cut will eat up half. Doyeon said he wanted 1.5 silver coins for all 3. Chang Ho grimaced. He offered 1. Doyeon said he would sell them himself in the county town then. Chang Ho looked at his leg, at the crutch, and realized Doyeon was bluffing. But he didn't take the risk. He offered 1 silver coin and 20 copper coins. Doyeon agreed. Chang Ho paid. He loaded the fish with difficulty. The donkey sagged under the weight. Before leaving, Chang Ho turned around. He asked if he could come every day. Doyeon said he couldn't promise every day, but maybe every other day. Chang Ho nodded. Then he hesitated and asked where it came from. Doyeon looked out at the sea and said, "The sea provides it." Chang Ho didn't ask any further questions. He left. Doyeon stood there with a silver coin and 20 copper coins in his hands. Together with yesterday's 37, that made 177 copper coins. Enough for the entire course of treatment, with some to spare. But the medicine was in the county seat, a day's journey away. He found Aunt Yoon. He asked if anyone was going to the county seat in the coming days. She said that the day after tomorrow, Im-tae-il from the neighboring village of Hwari would be taking dried seaweed to the market. He has a cart. He might take a passenger. Doyeon asked how far it was to Hwari. She said a half-hour walk for a healthy person, an hour for him, maybe more. He nodded and began to get ready. But first, he did 2 things. The first, he went out to the water in the morning and read it. He found a school of small horse mackerel 100 paces from the pier at a depth of 5 meters. About 80 of them. He cast his line. He pulled up 76 horse mackerel. Small fish, cheap, but edible. I left 20 at home. I laid out 56 on the pier. Then I went up to Auntie Yoon and told her that if she went out to sea with her repaired net right now and cast it 100 paces from the pier, just to the left of the big rock, there was another school there. Auntie Yoon looked at him, then at her grandchildren. Then she grabbed the net and ran toward the shore. Well, she didn't exactly run. She hobbled quickly. Her little boat went out to sea. Doyeon stood on the pier and watched. She cast. Crooked. Missed. She pulled in an empty net. Cast again. Closer. 1 fish. Third time. 5 fish. She didn't know how to cast, but he'd given her the right spot. In an hour, she pulled in 12 horse mackerel. Not much, but 12 is more than 0. She returned to shore, wet and with trembling hands. She held the fish as if they were gold. Her eldest grandson ran out to her and helped carry them. Doyeon thought he needed to teach her how to cast. And not just her. The second thing he did was for his sister. Before leaving, he prepared food for her for 2 days. He salted the horse mackerel in a clay pot. He boiled seaweed. He found wild onions on the hillside and chopped them finely. He divided everything into small pots and set them in a cool corner. Sonka stood by the wall and watched. She asked where he was going. He said to the county town, for medicine. She asked what kind. He said, for maca bark. She froze. Then she sat down. She said that mohayan bark costs a fortune, that her mother had asked her father to buy it and he couldn't, that it's useless, that he shouldn't waste money on it. He crouched down in front of her, looked her in the eyes, said he had the money, that all he had to do was walk there and buy it, that in 3 days he'd be back with the medicine. She turned away. Her shoulders trembled. She told him not to spend it all on her, to at least buy himself a decent crutch. He stood up, stroked her head, and left. The walk to Kavari took an hour and a half, a rocky path along the shore, every step on a crutch, every stone underfoot. His right leg dragged along the gravel, and twice he stumbled and fell. He got up. He kept going. The village of Hawari was twice the size of Tolfo. 20 houses, a small market, 2 docks, and people. More people. He found Im Tae-il, a sturdy man with a tanned face and calm eyes. A cart stood by his house, loaded with sacks of seaweed. Doyeon offered 5 copper coins for a spot in the cart. Tae-il looked at him, looked at his leg, said there was no need to pay, that there was room in the cart, that they would leave at dawn. Doyeon thanked him. He spent the night at the pier, wrapped in an old sail he'd found on the shore. It was cold. It was rough. His leg ached all night. At dawn he climbed into Tae-il's cart and they set off. The road wound through the hills. The donkey struggled under the heavy load. The cart creaked over every bump. Tae-il was silent for the first hour. Then he asked if it was Doyeon who was catching the silver sardines. Doyeon asked how he knew. Tae-il said that Chang-ho had told him at the market, that now the whole district knew, that fish was coming in from Tolfo that hadn't been seen in 3 years. Doyeon said nothing. Tae-il shook his head. He said that Doyeon needed to be more careful, that when a small man catches a big fish, the big men take notice. Doyeon asked who he meant. Tae-il spat on the road and said one word. Che. The Che trading house. They controlled the fish buying along the entire east coast. Every merchant paid them a cut. Every fisherman sold through their network. Anyone who didn't pay was tracked down. Tae-il told a story. 2 years ago, a fisherman from the village of Songpo found a rich school of tuna. He fished for 3 months. He got rich. He bought a new boat. The Che trading house sent people. They offered protection. The fisherman refused. A week later, his boat was found empty on the open sea. The fisherman was never found. Doyeon listened. He memorized it. He said nothing. But inside he was calculating. His catch had already reached the market. Chang-ho sells at the county market. The market is controlled by the House of Che. So they already know. The only question is when they'll come. The county town was called Haeju. Small by the capital's standards, but huge compared to Tulfo. Stone walls. A gate bearing the provincial coat of arms, a market spanning 3 streets, a port with 12 docks, hundreds of people, noise, shouts, the smell of fried fish and spices. Tae-il's cart stopped at the market entrance. Doyeon got out and immediately went to look for a herbalist shop. on a crutch across the cobblestone pavement. People turned to look. A cripple in rags, dirty, smelling of fish. He found the apothecary's shop on the second street. Small, dark. Behind the counter, an old man with a long beard and tired eyes. Doyeon asked if he had any Mohayan bark. The old man looked up. He looked at him. Said he did. 20 doses, 3 copper coins per dose. Doyeon took out his money, counted out 60 copper coins. The old man looked at the copper coins in the fisherman's dirty hand. Then, without a word, he pulled a small canvas bag from under the counter. 20 little bundles wrapped in oiled paper. In each, a handful of brown powder with a sharp, bitter smell. He said to brew 1 bundle in a cup of hot water, to drink it in the morning on an empty stomach, not to miss a single day. In 20 days the cough will go away. If it doesn't go away, it means it's not a whooping cough, but something else. Doyeon took the bag. He hid it in his bosom. He thanked him. He went out. He stood on the street and breathed. He held the medicine in his hands. 20 doses. In 20 days, Sanka would stop coughing. If the medicine helped. If it was that kind of cough. If he wasn't too late. He didn't allow himself to think of the worst. He walked back toward the market. He still had money left. A silver coin and 57 copper coins. He walked through the stalls. He looked. He memorized the prices. Fresh sardines were a copper coin a dozen. Red brim were 7 copper coins apiece. Grouper were 25. Chanho had cheated him. Not by much, but he had cheated him. He remembered. Then he found a row selling supplies. Ropes, fabrics, fishing gear. Good quality hemp rope cost 3 copper coins for 10 meters. He bought 30 meters. Then he found a blacksmith and ordered 6 iron hooks for sinkers. 2 copper coins. Then, in the market square, he saw a stall selling crutches and walking sticks. He remembered Sanwa's words. He walked over. He looked. The cheapest crutch, made of sturdy wood with a leather wrap, cost 10 copper coins. He bought it. He placed it under his arm. He shifted his weight. The difference was like walking on sand versus walking on stone. Firm. Comfortable. His armpit didn't burn. He took 10 steps and, for the first time in 4 days in this body, didn't clench his teeth in pain. Then he returned to Taeil's cart. Taeil had already sold the seaweed and was sitting in the shade, chewing on a rice cake. They headed back before dark. On the way, Taeil said he'd seen a man from the Cho family at the market. A buyer. He was walking between the stalls, asking who was bringing in red bream and grouper. Doyeon nodded. He thanked him for the heads up. Taeil shrugged and said that Doyeon had repaired Widow Yoon's net, and Widow Yoon was his distant relative. So they weren't strangers anymore. He made it to Tolfo by nightfall. Sanhwa hadn't been sleeping. She was sitting by the cold hearth, waiting. He walked in. He took out a small bag, unwrapped 1 packet, brewed it in hot water, handed her a cup. She took it with both hands, sniffed it, frowned, looked at him, and drank it in 1 gulp. Bitter. She grimaced. He said 1 more tomorrow morning, and the day after, and every day for 20 days in a row. She nodded, then quietly said thank you. He lay down on the mat. His leg throbbed, his back ached. His hands were calloused from the oars. The new crutch stood against the wall. The medicine was tucked in his sister's bosom. The rope and hooks were in the bag. Tomorrow is a new day, a new cast, a new step forward. He closed his eyes and fell asleep instantly. A week had passed. 7 days, 7 casts. Not a single one wasted. On the first day after returning, he caught 60 horse mackerel and gave 20 to Aunt Yoon. On the second, he found a school of mackerel at a depth of 8 meters and pulled up 47 of them. Big ones, fatty ones. They hadn't seen any like that in Tulfo for 2 years. On the third day, he caught 20 swordfish, long, silvery predators with sharp noses. The meat was tender, almost boneless. He baked one for Sanhua with wild garlic, and she said it was better than grouper. On the fourth day, the water near the shore was empty, so he rowed a kilometer north before finding a school of small tuna. 15 of them. Small by tuna standards, but 3 kilograms each. When Chang Ho saw them, he forgot to haggle and paid market price right away. On the 5th day, a storm kept him from going out to sea. He sat at home all day and wove a net, a new one, a big one, 3 by 3 meters, made of hemp rope bought in Haeju, with sinew threads woven in, 8-centimeter mesh, for large fish, iron sinker hooks along the bottom edge. He tied knot after knot, and each one was perfect. On the 6th day, he went out with the new net and caught 80 mackerel in a single cast. The net held up. Not a single torn knot. He inspected it after the cast. Like new. On the 7th day, 2 things happened. In the morning, Sanhua coughed, and for the first time in a long while, there was no pink foam in her cough. She looked at the handkerchief covering her mouth. Clean. She looked up at Doyeon. He nodded. The medicine is working. 7 doses out of 20. The cough was still there, but weaker. The wheezing was quieter. Her cheeks were slightly pinker. She ate every day. Fish and seaweed and wild herbs. Her body was slowly filling with life. The second thing. A boat approached the Tulfo pier. Not a fishing boat. A merchant ship. With a coat of arms on the sail. A red crab on a black field. The coat of arms of the Chue trading house. 2 men stepped out of the boat. The first was as strong as an ox, with a short neck and hands like shovels. A guard. The second was slender, wearing a clean blue robe with a belt made of fine leather. His face was neat. His smile was even. His eyes were those of a merchant, sharp and calculating. He introduced himself. Cho In-guk, 3rd-rank buyer for the Chue trading house. The villagers hid. Grandpa Park went inside. Aunt Yoon took the grandchildren away. Even the children stopped playing. Only Doyeon stood on the pier, with a new crutch, in old clothes, smelling of fish. Cho In-guk approached. He smiled. He said he'd heard about the fisherman from Tulfo who catches rare fish, that the Cho house values such people, that he'd come to propose a partnership. The terms were simple. All of Doyeon's catch would go through the Cho house. The price would be set by the house, plus 10% of the market value to Doyeon personally, plus patronage, protection, stability. Doyeon listened. He did the math. 10% of the market value. That meant for yesterday's grouper, which Chang Ho sold for 25 copper coins, he would have received 2.5. For 100 mackerel at 2 copper each, that's 20 copper for him and 180 for the house. Robbery. He said no. In-guk didn't stop smiling. He said it was a generous offer, that ordinary fishermen get 5%, that 10% is a sign of respect. Doyeon repeated that no. Inguk paused, nodded. Said he understood that the first conversation is always the hardest, that he'd be back in a week, and that Doyeon should think it over. Because catching fish is easy, but selling them on this coast without Dam Chue. Inguk didn't finish his sentence. He just smiled, turned around, got into the boat. The guard followed him. The boat headed out to sea. Doyeon stood on the pier and watched it go. The first contact, gentle, polite. The next one would be tougher. He knew. Taeil had warned him. The fisherman from Songpo had warned him with his fate. But giving up 90% of the catch meant returning to poverty. It meant that Songhua wouldn't get her second dose of medicine, that Aunt Yoon would be eating crabs again, that everything he had built over the past week would crumble. No. He turned and headed toward the village. And then someone called out to him. The voice was unfamiliar, low and hoarse. He turned around. Standing on the shore by an overturned boat was a man he hadn't seen before. Tall, lean, about 50 years old. His left arm hung limply. His right was strong and weathered. His face was weather-beaten. His eyes were calm and heavy. People who have seen a lot of bad things and have stopped being surprised have eyes like that. The man said his name was So Byung-young, that he was a former captain, that he'd lost his ship and crew in a storm 4 years ago, that Dam Che had accused him of negligence and revoked his license, that since then he'd been wandering the coast, repairing boats in exchange for food, that he'd heard about the fisherman from Tolfo, and that he'd seen how Doyeon had just turned down the buyer, Che. Doyeon looked at him. His left hand was dead, just like his right leg. 2 cripples. Byung-yeon said he could handle any vessel, from a fishing flatboat to a merchant barge, with 1 hand. He knows the coastline for 300 li in either direction. Every reef, every current, every port. He said he didn't need money. He needed a boat. He needed to be back on the water. And if Doyeon needed a boatman, he wouldn't find anyone better than him. Doyeon looked at this man and saw an engineering problem. A damaged left hand. So he can't hold an oar with both hands. That means he needs a one-handed steering system, a tiller, or a sail with one-handed rigging. He was already sketching out the design. He asked how long his left arm had been out of commission. Byung-yeon said 4 years. Doyeon asked what had happened. Byung-yeon said a log had fallen on his shoulder when the mast broke. P elbow joint. The arm moves at the elbow and wrist, but he can't lift it above his waist. Doyeon nodded. He said he'd take him on. But first, they needed a boat. A real one. Not this rotten, flat-bottomed boat. Byung-yeon smiled. He said he knew where to get a hull. In Hwari, an old fishing schooner lay on the shore, abandoned. The owner had died. No heirs. The hull was sturdy, the mast was broken, the deck was rotten, but the bottom was intact. If repaired, it would make a good boat. For 2, maybe 3. Doyeon said they were going to Hwari tomorrow. Byung-yeon nodded. That evening, Doyeon sat in the house and sketched, with a stick on the dirt floor. He drew a diagram of the boat. The hull was standard for local schooners, 4 to 5 meters long, 1.5 meters wide, a single mast, a square sail. He redrew it, removed the standard rigging, put a boom on a hinge with a one-handed pull, moved the tiller to the port side so Byung-young could steer with his right hand, added a backrest at the stern, made a platform for casting the net at the bow with a railing so he could brace himself and not fall with only one working leg. Sunhwa looked at his drawings. She asked what it was. He said he was drawing a boat. She asked for whom. He said for them. She was silent for a long time. Then she said they had never had a boat of their own, that her father always borrowed other people's, that having your own boat is like having your own home, only better. He looked at her. Coughed twice today, 4 times yesterday. His cheeks were a little fuller, his eyes were brighter. The medicine was working. He said that in a month they would have both a boat and a proper home. She looked at him with the kind of gaze 13-year-old girls give to older brothers who promise the impossible, with a mixture of hope and fear that the hope would be in vain. The next morning he got up at dawn. Byung-young was already waiting at the pier. He had slept on the shore wrapped in a tattered blanket. They went to Hwari, Doyeon on a crutch, Byung-young by his side. They walked in silence. It was easier for Doyeon with his new crutch. The walk took an hour. The junk lay on a rocky beach at the southern edge of the village, its hull darkened by age. The mast was broken 2 meters up. The deck had caved in 3 places. But when Doyeon tapped the bottom, he heard the sound of soundwood. Solid. Hollow. No emptiness. He walked around the boat. He examined every seam, every plank. Byung-young was right. The hull was sturdy. The master who built this boat knew his craft. The planks fit tightly. The seams were caulked and tarred. Even after several years on the shore, the bottom held up. He estimated the work. Replaced the deck, a new mast, rigging, a railing at the bow, a casting platform, a tiller. That's a week's work if there are 2 of us. Maybe 10 days. We need lumber. We need tools. We need tar. We need nails. He asked Byung-young if there was a carpenter in Hwari. Byung-young said there was one. Old Man Moon. He makes oars and barrels. They found Old Man Moon. A small old man with huge hands and a quiet voice. Doyeon explained what was needed. Mun listened in silence. Then he named his price. 30 copper coins for the wood and the work. Doyeon agreed. They started that very day. Doyeon drew. Byung-young sawed. Mun planed. By evening they had removed the old deck. Beneath it the frames were like new, sturdy, dry. Doyeon ran his hand over the wood. A good boat. It will serve for a while yet. He spent 3 days in Hwari. Every morning he returned to Tulfo at dawn. He cast his line. He left fish for Songhwa and the neighbors, and he walked back. An hour and a half each way. 3 hours of walking a day, on one leg. His leg burned, his back ached, but he walked. On the morning of the 4th day he cast his line, and reading the water he found something strange. At a depth of 12 meters, 300 paces from the shore, stood a solitary fish. Not large, medium-sized, but the signature was unusual. The body was narrow, the fins were long. The body glowed on his internal sonar with a strange, warm hue he had never seen before. He looked closely, and he recognized it. The yarrow fish, fennip. He knew about it from the blog he had kept in his past life. The yarrowfish was considered mythical in modern ichthyology. It was mentioned in old Korean texts as a delicacy of the imperial court. Meat with the aroma of mountain herbs. Che was used in traditional medicine. In this world, it was also a rarity. In Doyeon's Memories of Others, Thenip was mentioned only in fairy tales. The locals considered it non-existent. He formulated the thought in his mind. Thenip, the yarrowfish. A single specimen. An adult. 12 meters long. He cast the net. He waited. The rope tightened gently, almost tenderly. He pulled. A fish the length of his forearm emerged from the water. Greenish silver with thin stripes along its body. Its fins spread out like wings, and it smelled. Herbs. Mountain herbs. As if someone had placed a bunch of sage next to the sea fish. He carefully removed it from the net, placed it on the wet seaweed. It was alive, floundering weakly. A beautiful fish. He didn't sell it. That evening, he prepared thenip for Sonhwa, baked it over charcoal with sea salt. When the fish was ready, the room filled with a scent that made your head spin. Herbs, the sea, smoke. Sonhwa ate in silence with her eyes closed. Then she opened them and said that nothing could be this delicious. He smiled and said that it could. That there's a lot in the sea that people don't know about. She finished eating, looked at him, and said that when she got better, she'd go fishing too, just like him. He wanted to say no, that she'd learn to read and write and live a normal life. But he looked into her eyes and saw something there that hadn't been there before. Fire. Small, but alive. He said, okay, that when she got better, he would teach her how to knit nets. She nodded, and for the first time ever, she didn't cough before going to sleep. Chapter Summary. Within a week, Doyeon had stabilized the daily catch and began feeding the village. Chetcho Inguk, the buyer for the Che house, offered protection in exchange for 90% of the catch and was refused. Former Captain So Byung-young joined as a boatman. Construction began on their own boat from an abandoned schooner in the village of Hwari with the help of Carpenter Moon. Doyeon caught the legendary 1,000-leaf fish. Songhwa's condition is improving. The Che family promised to return in a week. The boat was ready on the 10th day. Doyeon stood on the shore of Hwari and looked at it. 4.5 meters long, 1.5 meters wide. A new deck made of light wood. A mast carved from a single pine trunk. A sail made of thick fabric that Byung-young traded to the Hwari fishermen for 3 mackerels. At the bow, a casting platform with waist-high railings. The railings were sturdy. He checked. He leaned his full weight against them. They didn't budge. With this support, he could stand on one leg and cast the net with both hands. The tiller on the port side. Long, curved to fit his right hand. Byung-young grabbed it and steered the boat through the shallows. With one hand. The boat obeyed. He turned it around, again and again. Then he stopped. He looked at the tiller, at the sail rigging, at the boom hinge that allowed him to change the angle with a single movement. He was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly that in 30 years on the water he had never seen a design like this. That it was made for his hand, for his shoulder, for his body. Doyeon said that was the intention. Byung-young turned toward the sea and stood motionless for a few seconds. Then he said the boat needed a name. Doyeon already knew what it was. Sunhwa Ho. Byungyeon nodded. They launched Sunhwa Ho at noon. Old Man Moon stood on the shore and watched his work sail out to sea. He waved his hand. Doyeon waved back. The wind caught the sail and the boat set off, quickly, easily. Byungyeon steered with one hand and the boat cut through the water like a knife. Doyeon sat on the bow and looked out at the sea. From the boat, the world looked different. The shore receded. The horizon expanded. He closed his eyes and read the water, and gasped. From the boat, he could see 3 times as far. Reading the water worked over distance, and from the shore he could see 200 paces. From the boat, on the open sea, 600, maybe more. A whole map. Temperature layers, currents, schools of fish. He saw a school of mackerel 400 paces to the southwest. About 200 of them. He saw a lone stingray on the bottom, right beneath the boat. He saw small fish near the surface, a silvery scattering. And far to the north, at the very edge of his vision, something huge, dark, deep. He didn't look. Not yet. Today, he had a different task. Mackerel. 200. The system allows 100. So 100. He mentally formulated the condition. Mackerel. Sexually mature individuals over 2 years old. Depth of 8 meters. A radius of 400 paces. 100. And he added, don't touch the females with roe. That wasn't a requirement of the system. It was his rule. From a past life. Sustainable fishing. Don't catch those that will produce offspring. Leave the females. Leave the young. Rotate the spots. The sea will respond. He cast the net, a new net from the platform. The cast was smooth, long. The net unfurled in the air and settled on the water in a circle. Beautiful. He surprised himself. The platform and the railing gave him a stability he didn't have from the pier. The rope tightened. He braced his hip against the railing and began to pull. Byungyeon brought the closer. The net came out of the water full. 100 mackerel. Large ones. Fatty ones. Bluebacks, silvery sides. They dumped the fish onto the deck, and Doyeon immediately saw that there wasn't a single female among them. The system had filtered them out, just as he'd said. Byungyeon stood knee-deep in fish and watched in silence. Then he said that in a single cast he'd seen more fish than in the last 4 years. Doyeon replied that this was only the beginning. They returned to Tolfo by midday. The fish were unloaded onto the pier. Doyeon set aside 20 for the village, 10 for Aunt Yu, 5 for Grandpa Park, 5 for the family on the edge of the village with 3 small children. He handed out fish every day. Not everyone accepted it with gratitude. Grandpa Park still wouldn't take it from his hands. Doyeon would leave it on a rock and walk away. And the fish always disappeared. He prepared the remaining 80 mackerels for Chang Ho. But in the evening, it wasn't Chang Ho who came. A woman came, young, about 19, a stern face, something resembling glasses on her nose, 2 polished pieces of rock crystal in thin copper frames. Her hair was pulled back into a tight knot. Her clothes were clean, but not fancy. Over her shoulder hung a canvas bag from which bundles of dried herbs protruded. She approached the house and asked if a fisherman who caught rare fish lived there. Sunhwa stepped onto the porch. She looked at the woman. She said he was here. The woman introduced herself as Yoon Min Soo. She said she was an herbalist, that she had come from the village of Chilbon, a 2-day journey to the south, that she had heard from the merchant Chang Ho about a fisherman who hauled fish from the sea that hadn't been seen in 3 years. Doyeon came out of the house. He saw her, and she saw him. She looked at his crutch, at his leg, at his calloused hands. Then she looked him in the eyes and said she needed seahorses. He wasn't expecting that. He asked why. She explained in a calm, dry voice. A salt cough is treated with moyang bark, but moyang bark only relieves the symptoms. The disease runs deeper, in the lungs. The salt corrodes the tissue from the inside. To restore the tissue, you need an extract from a specific type of dried seahorse. The Hema horse. Small, yellow. It lives at a depth of 30 meters among the corals. Local fishermen don't go that deep, and without the extract, the mohayan bark is only a temporary measure. The cough will return in 6 months. Doyeon listened, and something inside him snapped. Mohayan bark. 20 doses. He thought it would cure Sun Hwa. But it's only a reprieve. He looked at his sister. She was standing in the doorway and had heard everything. Her face went pale. Her lips pressed together. She didn't cry. She just turned away and went back into the house. Doyeon turned to Min Soo. He asked how many skates were needed. She said 10 for 1 patient. 10 dried Hema skates ground into powder and steeped in rice vinegar. 1 dose a week, 10 weeks. After that, the lungs would recover. He asked if she knew where to look. She looked at him strangely. She said that if she knew, she wouldn't have come to him. That the Hamakonik hadn't been seen off the coast of the archipelago for 15 years. Ever since the large schools had migrated south, the deep-water corals had begun to die out, and the conics had left with them. But if anyone can find them in these waters, it's only a fisherman who catches what isn't there. Doyeon sat down on the step. He closed his eyes. 30 meters. His system requires a physical cast. The net must reach the target. 30 meters down isn't 60 steps on the surface. But he'd already been catching them from 20 meters. 30. With heavy weights. With a long rope. If he finds a spot where the skates are right under the boat, he can just lower the net vertically. Not a cast. A drop. He opened his eyes. He said he'd try. Min Soo nodded. No smile. No thanks. Just a nod. The kind of nod a person gives when they're used to promises not being kept. She asked if she could stay in the village for a while. She said she might be useful. That she heals people. That she has herbs and knowledge. Doyeon looked at the village. 3 women with chronic back pain from working with the nets. Grandpa Park with a cough, though not as bad as Sun Hwa's. Children with rashes from the salt water. None of them had been treated in years. He said she could stay. He showed her an empty house next to theirs, the former home of a fisherman who had left for the mainland. The roof was shabby, but the walls were still standing. Min Soo inspected the house. She nodded. She took a rag out of her bag and began wiping the floor. Businesslike, without a word. Sun Hwa watched from the window. Then she went out and silently brought Min Soo a bucket of water. Min Soo took it. She looked at the girl, then at the cough that shook Sun Hwa. She took a bunch of dry grass out of her bag and held it out. She told her to brew it and drink it at night. It's not medicine. It'll just soothe your throat. Sun Hwa took it. The herbalist and the fisherman's sister stood facing each other, two gaunt figures against the backdrop of the gray sea. Then Sonhwa nodded and went back inside. Min-soo returned to her cleaning. Doyeon stood between two houses and thought. Hemaconic, 30 meters. Tomorrow he would go out to sea and look for... The next morning he went out to Sonhwa-ho with Doyeon. They sailed south along the coast. Doyeon checked the water every 100 paces. He looked for coral. He looked for horseshoe crabs. The seabed was barren. Sand, rocks, silt. Not a single coral. They sailed 2 kilometers. 3. 5. Nothing. Doyeon was silent. He steered the boat with one hand and waited. By noon, Doyeon asked to turn north. They passed Taltho and continued further north. 1 kilometer, 2, and then, at a depth of 25 meters, he saw color. Pale, pinkish, coral, small, 1, alive. All around it, a dead seabed. But this coral was alive. And next to it, he looked closely. A tiny silhouette, curved, motionless. A seahorse. 1. A yellow seahorse, the size of a pinky finger. It stood clinging to a coral branch with its tail. 1. Out of the 10 they needed. He dropped the net vertically with maximum weight. The rope went down, 25 meters. He counted by the marks he'd made on the rope. The net lay on the bottom. He formulated it in his mind. Hema, horse. 1 specimen. Depth, 25 meters. He pulled. The net came up easily. Too easily. A horse weighs a few grams. He wouldn't feel it in the net. He pulled it up. He spread the wet net out on the deck. He went through every mesh. He found it. In the very corner. A small yellow seahorse was clinging to the thread with its tail. Alive. He carefully removed it. He placed it in a bucket of seawater. 1 out of 10. Doyeon looked at the seahorse. He asked what it was. Doyeon explained. Doyeon whistled. He said they pay 5 silver coins for a single seahorse at the capital's market. Doyeon said this one wasn't for sale. Doyeon didn't ask for whom. They spent another 4 hours at sea. Doyeon found 2 more corals. There was a second seahorse next to one of them. He pulled that one out too. 2 out of 10. 8 left. They would keep looking, every day, until they found them all. They returned to Taltho by evening. Min-soo was waiting at the pier. She saw the bucket. She looked inside. She saw 2 horses. Her face didn't change, but her hands trembled. She carefully took one out. She looked at it in the light. She turned it over. She sniffed it. She said that this was it, a real hemiskate, one she had never seen alive in her entire life, only in her father's books. Doyeon said he had found 2 so far, that he would find the rest. She looked at him, a long look, and for the first time all day, her lips twitched slightly. Not a smile, but something close to it. She picked up the bucket and went back to her room. Doyeon stood on the pier and looked out at the sea. 8 horseshoe crabs, 30 meters deep. Dead corals. A dying world beneath the water. He thought that just catching fish wasn't enough. The fish needed to come back on their own. The corals needed to come back to life. The sea needed to stop being empty. But that wasn't a task for a single day, or even a single month. In 2 weeks, he found 7 conger eels. Every day, he and Byung-yeon went out to sea on the Songhua Ho and traveled along the coast. Doyeon scanned the water meter by meter. He searched for living corals. More often than not, he found dead ones, whitish skeletons on the sandy bottom. But sometimes, among the dead, there was a living one, pink or pale yellow, and next to it, a seahorse. Not always. Out of 20 live corals, there was a seahorse with 4. 7 seahorses in 14 days. 3 remained. Min-soo dried them using a special method. She laid them out on a flat rock in the shade. She turned them over twice a day. After a week of drying, the seahorse became hard and light as a splinter. She ground it into powder in a stone mortar. The smell was sharp and bitter. Sonka winced at the mere scent, but her cough subsided with each passing day. The Mohayan bark was doing its job. The 14th dose. 6 left. There had been no pink foam for a week. The wheezing at night had become less frequent. She began to leave the house. She sat on the pier and watched her brother go out to sea. Once, she asked him to take her. Doyeon said it was too soon, that when he had finished all 20 doses, then. She pouted, but said nothing. The village was changing, slowly, like the tide lifting the water on the shore, imperceptibly until you look back. Aunt Yoon fished every day. Not much, 10 to 15 small fish, but she fished. Her repaired net held. Every morning before heading out to sea, Doyeon told her where the fish were near the shore. She would remember and go. Her grandchildren stopped looking hungry. Their cheeks filled out. Their eyes grew calmer. The family with 3 children on the edge of the village also came to life. The husband came to Doyeon and asked him to mend his net. Doyeon mended it. He retied all the knots. He showed him how to cast so the net would open wider. The old man practiced on the shore for 3 days. Then he went out to sea and caught 20 horse mackerel. He returned with eyes like a child who had received a gift. Grandpa Park still didn't speak to Doyeon, but he stopped calling him a devil's spawn. It was noticeable. Before, when Doyeon walked by, Grandpa would mutter and turn away. Now he just sat on a rock and said nothing. Once Doyeon saw Grandpa fixing his old fishing rod. His hands were shaking. The line was tangled. Grandpa was angry and groaned. Doyeon walked over. He didn't ask permission. He just sat down next to him. He took the rod, untangled the line, tied on a new hook with a clever knot that wouldn't come undone. He checked the rod. Bamboo, sturdy, a good rod, old but still in working order. He handed it back to the old man. The old man took it. He looked at the knot. He tugged at it. It didn't come undone. He tugged harder. The hook held. The old man looked at Doyeon. He didn't say anything, but he nodded. Once. Briefly. Doyeon stood up and left. That nod meant more than words. On the 15th day, what he had been waiting for happened. The buyer returned. Not Choing-guk. Another one. The same boat. A crab crest on the sail. But different people. 4 of them. All healthy. All with short knives on their belts. The eldest introduced himself. Moon Chan-il, a second-rank buyer, 1 rank above Inguk. His voice was firm. His eyes were hard. No smile. He didn't make an offer. He stated. He stated that the Che house was taking Tulfo under its management. That from this day forward all the village fishermen would sell their catch only through the house. The price was fixed. 5 copper coins for a dozen mackerel. 3 for a dozen horse mackerel. Anyone who didn't agree could leave. On foot. Without a boat. Without nets. Without a home. Because the houses stand on land that belongs to the county administration, and the county administration answers to the Cho house. Doyeon stood on the pier, Byungyeon beside him, the village behind him. Aunt Yoon peered out from the doorway. The children had hidden. Min So stood by her house and watched. Sun Hwa sat on the threshold. Doyeon asked what would happen if he refused. Moon Chan-il looked at him. He said nothing would happen, right now. But tomorrow his net might tear. The day after tomorrow the boat might spring a leak. In a week, the merchant who buys his fish might disappear. Chang Ho is a good man, isn't he? It would be a shame if something happened to him. Doyeon was silent. Byungyeon stood next to him, straight as a mast. His right hand was clenched into a fist. A muscle twitched on his cheek. He knew what the Cho family was like. They had ruined his life 4 years ago. Doyeon looked at the 4 men with knives. He looked at the village behind him, at Sun Hwa on the threshold, at Min So by the house, at Aunt Yoon behind the door. Then he looked out at the sea and said he'd think about it. Moon Chan-il nodded, said he had 3 days, and got into the boat. The 4 sailed away. Byungyeon turned to Doyeon. He said there was nothing to think about, that Dom Cho wasn't joking, that if they agreed, they would bleed the village dry, and if they refused, 20 would come instead of 4. Doyeon said he wasn't going to agree or refuse, that there was a third way. Byungyeon asked what it was. Doyeon said they needed to become too valuable to be easily broken, that they needed to sell not through Chang Ho, but directly to the market, that they needed to sell not mackerel, but what no one else could sell. Rare fish, yomogi fish, delicacies for restaurants in the capital, medicinal ingredients, things the Cho house doesn't control because they don't know they exist. Byungyeon listened. Then he smiled. He said that to do this, we need access to buyers in the capital. But the capital is far away. And who controls the trade routes? That's right, the Cho house. Doyeon said it wasn't necessary, that there were foreign merchants, that he'd seen Western ships in Haiju Harbor. Byungyeon raised an eyebrow. He said it was possible to work with foreigners, but an interpreter was needed. Doyeon thought, an interpreter, 4 languages, Western contacts, the harbor district. Someone else's memories yielded a fragment. Someone had mentioned a half-blood girl in Haiju, the daughter of a Western merchant. She speaks all the languages. Strange, vibrant. He couldn't remember her name, but he knew where to look. He told Byungyeon that tomorrow they were going to Haiju, not by cart, by Onwaho, faster by sea. Byungyeon nodded, but first Doyeon did one more thing. He took a net, went out to the pier, closed his eyes and read the water. Far to the south, 500 paces from the shore at a depth of 15 meters, he saw a school of fish he hadn't seen before. Silvery, flat, large, in shape and behavior similar to oilfish. Escalar. In his past life, he knew that oilfish cost a fortune in haute cuisine restaurants. but it was rarely found for sale due to the peculiarities of its meat. Fatty, oily. The taste was incredible. Local fishermen probably considered it trash. Too fatty, spoils quickly, slippery. They threw it back if they caught it by accident. But for a chef in the capital, this fish is gold. He memorized the coordinates. Tomorrow. Everything tomorrow. Heijo looked completely different from the sea. The stone walls of the port, long sturdy piers, dozens of boats. 3 large ships with square sails, 2 local ones, 1 Western, a flag with a cross and an eagle. Doyeon didn't know whose it was, but the ship was a merchant vessel, a cargo ship, wide and heavy with a deep draft. Byung-yong steered the Songhua Ho to a small pier. Doyeon made his way ashore. The port district was buzzing like a beehive. Porters were hauling sacks, merchants were shouting. It smelled of fish and tar and some spices he didn't recognize. He walked along the waterfront, asking around, looking for a half-blood girl, the daughter of a Western merchant. She speaks many languages. The first merchant looked at him as if he were crazy. The second waved him off. The third laughed and pointed to the end of the waterfront. There, the last house, with a red door. He reached it. The house was small. The walls were plastered. The door was red. A girl was sitting on an upside-down crate in front of the house. Young, about 20. The first thing he saw was her clothes. A Western-style dress made of something colorful over fisherman's pants tucked into high boots. Her hair was chestnut brown, not black like the locals. Her eyes were large, light brown. Her nose had freckles. She was eating an apple and swinging her leg to the beat of some tune she was humming to herself. She saw him, looked at his crutch, at his clothes, at his face, and said in perfect local dialect that if he had come for her father's debt, her father had left 3 months ago and hadn't left an address. Doyeon said he hadn't come for the debt, that he needed someone who spoke Western languages and knew foreign traders. She stopped swinging her foot, looked more closely, asked why. He said he had fish that Western merchants would buy for a high price. She laughed. She said everyone sells fish here. He said his fish wasn't just any fish. He took a bundle out of his bag. He unwrapped it. Inside lay a piece of oily fish. He had caught 3 that morning before setting out. He left 1 for Sanwa, 1 for Min-soo to make fish soup. He took the 3rd with him. On the deck of the Sanwa Ho, he gutted it and salted the flesh. White, fatty, with a pearlescent sheen. The girl looked at fish. She sniffed it. Her eyes widened. She asked what it was. He said it was oilfish, escalar. She said she knew the word, that her father had told her about it, that on the Western continent it was a dish for royal tables, that they paid a pound's worth of silver for it. Doyeon nodded. He said he had access to a school of them. And it wasn't just oily fish. There's thousand-leaf fish. There are deep-sea sea urchins. There's something no fisherman on the coast has. He needs a trading partner. Not Dom Cho. Someone else. She looked at him for a long time. Then she took a bite of the apple, chewed it, swallowed. She said her name was Kim Emmy, that she could introduce him to the captain of a Western ship docked in the harbor, that the captain was looking for local delicacies for the return voyage, that she wanted 20% of the deal. Doyeon said 10, she said 15. He agreed. They shook hands. Her palm was small and warm, with calluses on her fingers. The hands of a working person. She stood up and led him along the waterfront. She talked as they walked. Her father had left because trade had collapsed. The Cho family had imposed such high duties on foreign merchants that half of them had left. 3 ships remained. This was the last Western one. Captain William Birch. He traded in silk and spices. He'd never carried fish. But Amy knew that in the Western market, fresh sea fish cost more than silk. They approached the ship. Amy shouted something in the Western language. A red-haired man with a beard leaned over the side. Amy spoke with him, quickly, in a language Doyeon didn't understand. Then she turned and said the captain would come down. Captain Birch turned out to be a short, stocky man with a red face and a loud voice. He looked at the fish. He touched the flesh. He sniffed it. He tasted a piece raw. He froze. He chewed slowly. He looked at Amy. He said something quickly. Amy translated. The captain wanted to know how many of these fish Doyeon could supply. Doyeon thought. The school of oilfish he had seen numbered about 100. He could catch 20 a day. If he alternated with other species, the school wouldn't disappear. But oilfish spoil quickly. They need cold, or salting, or smoking. He said 20 fish every 3 days. Salted. Amy translated. The captain named his price. 5 silver coins per batch of 20. Doyeon did the math. 5 silver coins is 500 copper coins. Minus Amy's 15%, that's 75 copper for her, 425 for him. That's more than he'd earned in all his previous work combined. In 3 days. He agreed. The captain held out his hand. Doyeon shook it. Deal. They returned to Amy's house. She sat on her crate and looked at him. She asked where he knew about oilfish. The locals considered it trash. He replied that he'd read a lot. She raised an eyebrow. She asked where a fisherman from Tolfo had learned to read. He remained silent. She didn't press him. She said she liked people with secrets. That secrets made life more interesting. Then she asked when the first shipment would be. He said in 3 days. She nodded. She said she'd be waiting at the pier. He and Byung-yeon left the port for Sonhwa-ho. On the way back, Byung-yeon said the girl was sharp, that they needed to keep a close eye on her. Doyeon said he knew. Byung-yeon paused. Then he asked what Doyeon would do when Dam Che found out about the Western captain. Doyeon said that by then he would have not just one buyer, but several. And not just fish. Byung-yeon shook his head. He said that Doyeon was either very smart or very reckless. Doyeon replied that in his past life, people had told him the same thing. Byung-yeon looked at him strangely, but he didn't ask which past life. That evening, Doyeon returned to Tolfo. Sonhwa was waiting. She hadn't coughed all day. She said that Minsu had examined her and said her lungs sounded better. Doyeon nodded. Then he took 2 apples out of his bag that he'd bought from Emmy. He gave one to Sonhwa. She took it. She turned it over in her hands. She asked what it was. He said an apple. She said she had never eaten an apple before. She took a bite. Her eyes lit up. She said it was sweet, like honey. He looked at her and thought that for this moment alone, it had been worth falling from the pier into the icy water. That night, he lay awake and counted. 3 days until the deadline from the Che house. 3 days until the first shipment for Captain Birch. He needed to catch 20 oil fish, salt them, deliver them to Heijo, get the money, and at the same time solve the problem with Cho. There was no time. But for the first time in his life, he felt no fear. He felt something akin to excitement, as if his entire past life had been preparation for this. For 3 days he worked like a machine. Day 1. He set out on the Sanhwa River before dawn, found a school of oil fish 600 paces from the shore, cast the net, hauled in exactly 20, each weighing a little over 2 kilograms, white, fatty meat. He returned to shore, gutted all 20, rinsed them in seawater, covered them with coarse salt he'd bought in Heiju last time, stowed them in a barrel he'd traded with Grandpa Park for 4 mackerels. Grandpa handed over the barrel without a word, didn't haggle. He didn't grumble. He just took it down from the roof where it had been drying and set it in front of Doyeon. It was almost a friendly gesture. The barrel of fish went into Aunt Yoon's cellar. It's cool and dark in there. The fish will be salted in 2 days. The second day. In the morning he went out again, but not for oil fish, for skates. The 3 that were left. He and Byung-yeon went farther north than usual, 10 kilometers from Tolfo. The water got colder, deeper, the currents stronger. He scanned the bottom meter by meter. Dead coral, sand, rocks, and suddenly, color. Not pink, scarlet. A large coral, alive, massive. Its branches spread 2 meters to either side, and around it, not just 1 seahorse, 4 yellow dots among the scarlet branches. He dropped the net. He said to himself, 3, just 3, leave 1. I need to test the system. He pulled it up. 3 seahorses in the net. The 4th remained on the coral. The system listened. 10 out of 10. He sat in the boat, holding 3 tiny yellow seahorses in his wet palm, and Byung-yeon watched him and said nothing. When they returned, Min-soo was standing at the dock. Doyeon handed her the seahorses. She took them, counted them, looked at him, and said that now she could prepare a full course, that in 10 weeks Sanhwa's lungs would be as good as new. Doyeon nodded. He didn't smile. He just nodded, because it was too early to smile. 10 more weeks. But now these were weeks of waiting, not searching. Min-soo turned to leave. She stopped. Without turning around, she said that her father had also been looking for Hema skates, for the wife of the village headman of Chilbon. He didn't find them. The woman died. Her family was banished. She paused. Then she said that Doyeon had found what her father couldn't, and she left. Doyeon stood on the pier. He realized he had just learned why Min-soo had become an herbalist, and why she had come to Tolfo, not just for the skates, for a second chance. The 3rd day, the day the Che family's deadline expired. In the morning, Doyeon took out a barrel of salted oil fish. He opened it. He checked it. The meat was firm, white with a pinkish tinge. The smell was clean, salty, no rot, perfect. They loaded the barrel onto the Sanhwa Ho. Byung-yeon steered the boat toward Heijo. The wind was at their backs. They made it in 2 hours instead of 4. Emmy was waiting at the pier. She saw the barrel, peered inside, took out a single fish, examined it. She sniffed it, nodded, led it to the western ship. Captain Birch inspected the goods, tasted a piece, approved, counted out 5 silver coins. Shiny, heavy. Doyeon looked at them and thought that in a past life, this money could have bought a meal at a nice restaurant. But here, it was half a year of a whole family's life. He gave Amy her share, 75 copper coins. She counted them, hid them. Then she said that Captain Birch was setting sail in a month, but before he left, he wanted to buy as much fish as possible. 10 shipments, 50 silver coins. Doyeon nodded. He and Byung-yeon left Haeju and headed back. Halfway there, Doyeon asked to stop. He closed his eyes. He read the water. He was looking for a school of oilfish. He found it. It had shifted 100 paces to the east, still about 100 fish, but something had changed. Among the school, small ones had appeared. Fry. The fish had begun to reproduce. He didn't touch the females. He didn't wipe out the school completely. He left them, and the sea responded. The school grew. He smiled. Sustainable fishing. It works here, too. They returned to Tolfo by evening and saw a boat with a crab emblem at the pier. The Cho families, but not 4 of them. Just one. Moon Chan-il. He was standing alone on the pier, without guards, waiting. Doyeon approached. Chan-il looked at him, said the term was up. He asked what the answer was. Doyeon said no. Chan-il wasn't surprised. He nodded. He said he would pass it on. Then he paused and said something strange. He said it wasn't up to him to decide what would happen next, that he was only passing on the message, that personally, he thought Doyeon was making a mistake, but that it was his mistake and his right. And he left. The boat with the crab emblem faded into the evening twilight. Byung-yeon stood nearby and watched it silently as it sailed away. Then he said that this one had been almost honest, that the next ones would be dishonest. Doyeon knew. He didn't sleep that night. He sat by the wall and thought. There is money. There is medicine. There is a boat. There is a trade route. But there is no protection. The village is exposed. The Che family could come at any moment. Burn the boat. Tear up the nets. Beat people. And he wouldn't be able to do anything. A cripple with a crutch. What could he do against 20 armed men? He needed allies. He needed strength, not in his fists, but in his connections. In his indispensability. He had to become so indispensable to so many people that it would be costly to touch him. He remembered the fisherman from Songpo who had become rich and refused Che. That fisherman was quietly taken out because he was alone. Doyeon won't be alone. He stood up, went out onto the pier. Night. The moon is almost full. In 2 days, it will be a full moon. The silver trail. Once a month, on the full moon, paths open up along which rare fish travel. The locals knew about this from legends. No one had fished on the silver trail for 3 years. But if it opened, if he could read it, then a single catch would yield enough not just for 1 village, but for 10. He stood barefoot on the pier and looked at the moonlit path on the water. In 2 days, he had to be ready. The full moon came on the night of the 17th. But the silver trail didn't open at night. It opened at dawn, when the moon still hung above the horizon and the sun was already rising on the other side. Between the 2 lights, between night and day, between darkness and light. Doyeon knew this from others' memories. Hana Doyeon's father had seen the silver path once in his life. He spoke of it with reverence. He said that the water became crystal clear all the way to the bottom, and the fish swam so thickly that it seemed as if the sea had turned silver. Doyeon got up long before dawn. He went out to the pier. Byung-yong was already there. He had been sleeping on the deck of the Songhwa-ho, a sailor's habit. Where the boat is, there is home. Doyeon woke him up. They said little. They prepared in silence. The net, ropes, barrels, salt, water. They set out to sea in complete darkness. The moon hung low over the western horizon. Huge, yellow. It almost touched the water. Doyeon closed his eyes and read the water. And he saw something he had never seen before. The entire sea before him was ablaze. Not with fire, with light. A bluish, shimmering light that emanated from the depths. The currents he had previously seen as lines on a map now pulsed like the veins of a living creature. And along one of these currents, from south to north, ran a strip of light. Wide, bright, like a road, a silver path. He opened his eyes. Byung-yong saw his face and asked, "What?" Doyeon pointed to the southeast. "Over there," he said. Byung-yong unfurled the sail. The wind was light, but the boat moved forward. They traveled for 20 minutes in the darkness along the moonlit path. Doyeon read the water constantly. The trail was drawing closer. He could see fish moving along it, not in schools, in a stream. Hundreds, saya, species he had never seen in these waters before. Large, silvery bodies moved in a dense mass at a depth of 5 to 15 meters. He tried to identify the species. Pink salmon. No, not pink salmon. Something else. The shape resembled a salmon, but the scales were silver and large. The fins were long. According to the former Doyeon's recollections, it was an inwa, a silver flower, a fish from legends. The flesh was pink and tender. In the capital, they used to give a silver coin for a single inwa, if the legends are to be believed. No one had caught a inwa in 3 years. Not a single fisherman on the coast. The horizon in the east began to turn pink. The moon in the west had faded but hadn't set. The two luminaries hung opposite each other. Between them, water. And a trail. Doyeon told Byung-yong to stop. The boat slowed down. It came to a stop. It rocked on the gentle waves. The trail ran right beneath them. The fish were so thick it seemed as if the boat were standing on a silver stream. Doyeon took the net. He stood on the platform. He braced his hip against the railing, his left foot on the deck, his right foot dangling, his hands on the net. He closed his eyes. He formulated the thought in his mind. Unhwa, silver flower. Adults over 3 years old. Depth from 5 to 15 meters. Don't touch the females. Don't touch the juveniles. 100. He cast it. The net went into the water and the rope tightened instantly. The pull was so strong that it dragged him chest first along the railing. He clung on. Byung-yong let go of the tiller and grabbed the rope nearby. With one hand, they pulled together. The water beneath the boat boiled with silver. The boat spun around. It listed. Byung-yong stared into the water and cursed. A silver river flowed beneath them. He saw the fish. Everyone saw the fish. They were so close to the surface that their backs were sticking out of the water. They pulled. A minute. 2. Their arms were on fire. Their shoulders were cracking. The net came out. Heavy. Silver. Alive. They hauled it over the side. The boat sank. The deck was covered in silver. The fish thrashed and leaped. 100 yinhua, each the size of a hand from shoulder to fingertips. Scales like a mirror, eyes golden. The flesh, if legends are to be believed, is pink and melts on the tongue. Byung-yong stood knee-deep in fish, breathing heavily. He looked at the catch, then at Doyeon, then at the horizon where dawn was flooding the sky with rose gold. He said he had seen the silver trail once, 30 years ago, as a boy, with his father. His father hadn't been able to catch a single one. The trail had vanished faster than he could cast his net. Doyeon nodded. The trail was already fading. The light in the depths was dying out. The fish were heading north. 10 minutes later, the water was back to normal. Gray, calm, as if nothing had happened. They turned the boat around and headed for shore. The boat moved slowly, low in the water. 100 large fish, that's the weight. The whole village was standing on the pier. Aunt Yoon, Grandpa Park, a family with 3 children, Min-soo and Songhwa. They had seen it, from the shore. They had seen the water turn silver. They had seen the light from the depths. They had seen Doyeon cast his net and pull silver from the sea. When the boat pulled up to the dock, Doyeon began unloading the fish. Byung-yeon handed them over. Doyeon took them and laid them out on the boards. Silver bodies, one after another. The villagers stood and watched in silence. Then Grandfather Park stepped forward. He approached the fish. He bent down. He looked. He touched them with trembling fingers. He picked up 1 yinhua. He brought it to his face, and he began to cry. The old man stood on the pier with the fish in his hands and wept like a child, because the last time he had seen an yinhua was 40 years ago, when he was a young fisherman, when the sea was bountiful, when his wife was alive, when everything was different. He set the fish down on the planks, wiped his eyes with his sleeve, turned to Doyeon, and for the first time ever, he spoke to him. Said he had been wrong, that this was not a devil's net, that the sea does not yield devil's fish. The yinhua comes only to those whom the sea loves. Every fisherman knows this. His father and his grandfather knew this. And if the sea gave Doyeon an yinhua, then the sea had chosen him. The old man bowed, low, to the ground. Aunt Yoon sniffled. Doyeon stood there, not knowing what to do. He didn't want the old man to bow. He walked over and lifted his grandfather by the shoulders. He said he didn't need bows, that he needed help. Grandfather straightened up, wiped his face, asked what kind. Doyeon said he wanted to build a smokehouse, that he would have a lot of fish and needed to store it, that Grandpa Park knew how to lay stone and how to build a furnace. It was true. In others' memories, Grandpa Park had been the village's best stonemason before his hands began to shake. Grandpa looked at his hands, then at Doyeon. He said that his hands weren't what they used to be, but his head still remembered, that he would show how and where to place them, and let the young ones carry the stones. Doyeon nodded. Then he distributed the fish. 10 yinhua to Grandpa Park, 10 to Aunt Yoon, 10 to the family with children, 10 to Min-soo for medicinal needs, 10 to Byung-yeon, Sung-hwe. 45 remained. He salted them in 2 small barrels. For Captain Birch, if a yinhua is worth a silver coin in the capital, it might be worth even more at the Western market. 45 yinhua. That could be 10 silver coins. Or 20. He didn't know, but he would find out. In the evening, he sat on the pier and looked at the moon. Full, bright. The silver trail had faded until next month, but the fish remained. 100 yunhua, a small fortune, and a whole month ahead, to build a smokehouse, to catch more, to strengthen the village, to be ready when the Che family returns. Sunhwa came out to him, sat down beside him, didn't cough, rested her head on his shoulder, said that Grandpa Park had laughed today for the first time in 2 years, that Aunt Yoon sang a song while she was cleaning fish, that a little girl from a family on the edge of the village had run up to her and said that silverfish were magic. Doyeon sat and listened. The moon hung over the sea. The water glistened. Somewhere in the depths, the spirit Suryan might have been looking up too. They began building the smokehouse the next day. Grandfather Park chose the spot. A slope above the village, rock beneath their feet, wind from the sea. Perfect draft. He sat on a boulder and gave orders. Doyeon hauled stones on one leg. Byung-yong hauled them with one arm. 2 cripples built the oven under the guidance of the old man with trembling hands. From the outside it looked pitiful. But by the evening of the first day, the foundation stood. Level. Sturdy. The stones fitted together perfectly. Grandpa Park knew his stuff. He checked every stone for sound. He tapped them with his knuckles. He listened. He said this one's good and that one isn't. Doyeon didn't argue. He knew his way around engineering, but when it came to stone, Grandpa Park was a master. On the second day, Aunt Yoon came with her grandsons. She said the boys could carry stones. They were 10 and 12 years old, skinny but wiry. They worked without complaint. On the third day, a man from a family on the edge of the village came. His name was Park Chul. Strong, silent, hands like shovels. He said nothing. He just started laying stones, faster than everyone else put together. By the end of the first week, the smokehouse was standing. A stone box 2 by 3 meters, as tall as a man. A roof of flat stones with slits for smoke. Inside, 3 levels of grates made of iron rods that Doyeon had ordered from a blacksmith in Haeju. The firebox at the bottom, the chimney on the side. Doyeon lit the first fire, kindling from juniper that Byung-yong had chopped on the hillside. Smoke rose. The draft worked. Steady, not too strong, not too weak. He laid 10 yunhua on the top grate, closed the door, and waited. 6 hours later, he opened it. The smell hit so hard that heads turned at the pier. Smoked yunhua, golden skin. The flesh was pink and moist. He cut off a piece and tasted it. He closed his eyes. In a past life, he had eaten smoked salmon at a restaurant in Seoul for 80,000 won. This was better. Much better. He took a piece to Minsu. She tasted it, chewed slowly, opened her eyes. Said that this fish could be used to make a medicinal ointment for joints. That the fat in the yinhua releases anti-inflammatory substances when smoked. She was already thinking like a doctor. He brought a piece to Songwei. She ate it and said that Oppa the alien now also like an alien. He laughed. She laughed too, without coughing. Pure laughter. For the first time. 2 days later, he took the smoked yinhua to Haeju, 20 pieces, plus a barrel of salted, oily fish. Amy met him at the pier. She saw the smoked fish. She tasted it. She fell silent for 10 seconds, which was a record for her. Then she said that this changed everything. That salted fish was a commodity, but smoked yinhua was a luxury. That Captain Birch would pay double. She turned out to be right. The captain tried it, He called his first mate. The first mate tried it. They called the cook. The cook tried it and sat down on the deck. The captain offered 10 silver pieces for 20 smoked quinoa, half a silver piece each, plus 5 for a barrel of oil fish, 15 silver pieces, 1,500 copper coins, in a single day. Doyeon stood on the pier with a pouch of silver in his hands and thought that in a past life he had been an engineer with a good salary. And here he was, a cripple on crutches, who had earned more in a month than the entire village of Tulfo did in a year. He gave Emmy her share. She counted it, hid. Then she looked at him and said he needed to think bigger. That one captain meant one channel. That ships from 4 countries called at Haejo port. That if he set things up right, he could sell to 10 captains at once. Doyeon said that would require more fish, more than 1 haul a day, but he only had 1. Amy narrowed her eyes. She said it wasn't necessary to catch more. You could catch what was worth more. Yarrowfish, hemaskates for doctors, sea urchins, anything no one else can get their hands on. Rare goods. It's not volume, it's price. He looked at her and thought that this girl in a colorful dress over her fisherman's pants was quicker on her feet than any merchant he'd met in 2 lifetimes. He said he'd think about it. She said that while he was thinking, she would make a list of the captains coming into Haeju in the coming month. That she already knew them all anyway. Because every one of them owed her father money, and she kept track. Doyeon nodded and left. On the way back, he took a detour. He turned into the spot where he'd found the scarlet coral with the skates. He closed his gun. He scanned the water. The coral was still there. The 4th skater he had left behind. And next to it, another one. Small. Young. The coral began to regenerate. Where he hadn't taken any, life was returning. Sustainable fishing. He smiled at the sea. He returned to Tulfo by evening and found a guest. An unfamiliar boat was moored at the pier, small, fast, without a coat of arms. A person in fine clothes stood on the pier. A woman, tall, straight back, hair styled in an elaborate updo. A dark silk dress, a leather case for brushes and a scroll on her belt. Her face was cold, beautiful, flawless. Her eyes were dark and attentive. She looked at the smokehouse on the hillside, at the nets hung on the walls of the houses, at the barrels of fish by the pier. She was counting. Doyeon saw how her eyes moved from one object to another, assessing. She turned toward him, looked at his crutch, at his hands, at his face. She introduced herself. Lee Da-hyun, inspector of the Tone Province Fisheries Department. She had come to conduct an inspection. A tip had been received in the village of Tulfo regarding illegal fishing and tax evasion. Doyeon looked at her, then at the sea, then at her again. He asked who had written the tip. Da-hyun said it was confidential information, but he already knew. The Che household. They didn't come with knives. They came with paperwork. Smarter than he thought. Da-hyun said she would spend 3 days in the village, inspect the farm, check the books, determine the amount of tax debt. Doyeon said he didn't have any books. She raised an eyebrow. Said that the absence of books was a violation in itself. He offered her tea. She refused. Said she doesn't drink tea from those being audited. He offered her fish. She looked at him the way people look at those offering a bribe. He said it wasn't a bribe, that everyone in the village eats fish, that she was a guest, that guests are given food. It wasn't a transaction. It was a custom. She was silent for a moment. Then she said she would accept one fish, as a guest's custom. He gave her a smoked inwa. She took it. She looked at it. She sniffed it. Her expression didn't change, but her nostrils twitched. She tucked the fish into her sleeve and went off to explore the village. For 3 days, Lee Da-hyun walked around Talfo with a brush and a scroll. She recorded everything. The number of houses, the number of residents, the number of boats, the size of the pier, the volume of the visible catch, the condition of the nets. She spoke with everyone. Aunt Yoon told her about the repaired nets. Grandpa Park showed her the smokehouse and said he had laid the stones. Park Chol mumbled something approving. Min Soo told her about the medicinal properties of fish oil and showed her notes. Da-hyun read, silently. Her expression didn't change. On the second evening, Doyeon was preparing dinner for Songhwa. Horse mackerel soup with wild onions and seaweed. Da-hyun walked by. She stopped. The smell. He saw her standing at the door. He invited her in. She hesitated. Then she entered. She sat down by the wall, far from the hearth, her back straight, her hands on her knees. Songhwa silently placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Da-hyun looked at the bowl, at Songhwa, at Doyeon. She picked up a spoon, tried it, 1 spoonful, a second, a third. She finished it, put down the spoon. She was silent for a full minute. Then she asked what kind of fish it was. Doyeon said horse mackerel, the usual kind. She shook her head. Said she'd been eating horse mackerel her whole life. This wasn't the usual kind. He explained. Horse mackerel caught that morning, gutted right away, rinsed in clean seawater, not in the harbor water, in the open sea, cooked an hour after being caught, with wild onions picked that morning, not yesterday, with seaweed dried in the wind, not on rocks. Every step matters. She listened. Then she said that this wasn't fishing. It was a craft. He said there was no difference. She went to her room. On the 3rd day, she packed her things. She stood on the pier. Doyeon approached. She said the complaint had not been substantiated, that the village of Talfo was fishing within the limits, that there were tax arrears but within acceptable limits, that she would issue a warning, not a fine. Doyeon thanked her. She nodded. She turned toward the boat. She stopped. Without turning around, she said that whoever wrote the complaint would write another one, that she would have to come, and that next time she wants to see the books. Doyeon said there would be books. She got into the boat and rowed away. Songhwa came out onto the pier and stood beside him. She said the inspector was pretty. Doyeon said nothing. Songhwa said she'd eaten 3 bowls of fish soup. Not just 1, 3, when she thought no one was watching. Doyeon looked at his sister. Songhwa shrugged and walked away. He stood on the pier and thought about how the House of Che had just lost the first move. The denunciation hadn't worked. But there would be other moves, and he had to be ready. A month had passed. The first real month in which Doyeon lived rather than merely survived. The crew had come together naturally. Byung-yong drove the Songhwa Ho. Doyeon fished. Park Chul handled the smokehouse and loading. Aunt Yoon and 2 other women cleaned and salted the fish. Aunt Yoon's grandchildren ran errands. Grandpa Park sat by the smokehouse, watching the fire and the smoke. He was better at it than anyone else. His old hands could tell the temperature of the wood by its smell. He said that juniper gives a golden color and alder a red one. That juniper was needed for inhwa and alder for mackerel. Doyeon took notes, not on paper, in his head. Minsu treated people. Someone came to her every day. Aunt Yoon with a bad back, Park Chul's wife with a sore knee, children with rashes and cuts. Minsu made ointments from fish oil and mountain herbs. She applied seaweed compresses. She brewed decoctions. For the first time in years, the village had a healer. And for the first time in years, Minsu had patients who trusted her. Her father had been driven out of Chilbon because he hadn't saved the village headman's wife. Here in Talfo, no one knew that story. Or perhaps they knew but didn't bring it up, because Minsu was a good healer. A cat appeared in the second week. Ginger, skinny, one-eyed. It came out of nowhere. It settled near Minsu's house. It stole fish from Doyeon every day. Every time he caught it in the act. A ginger face with one eye and a mackerel in its teeth. He'd take the fish away. The cat would hiss. An hour later, it would come back. Steal again. He'd take it away again. Sonhwa watched this and called him a soft-hearted fool, because every time he'd leave a single fish at Minsu's door for the cat. He thought no one was watching. Everyone saw. Emmy came every 3 days in a small boat she rented from a fisherman in Haizhou. She brought orders from the captains. She took the fish away. In a month, Doyeon sold fish worth 60 silver coins. 6,000 copper coins. A fortune by village standards. By county standards, too. He didn't save. He spent. He bought lumber and iron. He hired 2 carpenters from Hwari. He repaired the pier. He built a shed for drying fish. He bought Sonway a warm blanket and new clothes. He bought Byung-eun a set of tools for repairing boats. He bought Grandpa Pak a warm robe because the old man was freezing at night by the smokehouse. He bought Aunt Yoon a new net, a real one, made of good hemp with iron weights. She burst into tears and couldn't stop for half an hour. He repaired the roof of his house, plugged the cracks in the walls, put in a new door. It became warm inside, dry. Sonhwa stopped sleeping under 2 blankets. One was enough. She took Minsu's medicine every week. Hemkonk extract. Bitter, thick, yellow. Sonhwa grimaced every time, but she drank it. The cough disappeared completely on the 20th day of the Mahayan bark treatment. Now came the second stage, lung recovery. Minsu listened to her chest every 3 days. She pressed her ear against it. She asked her to breathe deeply. Then she nodded and said it was better. Better every time. Sonhwa began going out to the pier every day. She sat there. She watched. Then she asked for a job. Doyeon said no. She said that sitting around doing nothing was worse than being sick. He looked at her. 13 years old. Skinny, but no longer as transparent as before. She had cheeks. Her eyes were lively. Her hands were looking for something to do. He gave her a notebook. A real one, made of paper bought in Haizhou, and a brush. He told her to write everything down. What I catch, how much, when, who I sold it to, for how much. Books for Inspector Lee. Sonhwa took the notebook as if it were a treasure, and from that day on, every evening she wrote it down. The date, the type of fish, the quantity, the price. Doyeon dictated, She wrote. Her handwriting was clumsy but legible. She came up with the idea herself to draw little fish next to the names. Mackerel with stripes. Yonghua with big eyes. Butterfish, fat and round. Doyeon saw this and thought that his sister had a talent for something greater than fishing logs. But that was later, the end of the month. He sat on the pier in the evening and counted. 12 people depended on him. Not on the village, on him personally. On his one catch a day. Every day he went out to sea. Every day he fished. Every day he returned. If he got sick, if he broke his other leg, if the storm lasted a week, everything would collapse. He was alone, a single point of failure. In engineering, that's called a critical vulnerability. He couldn't teach others what he did. The system worked only with him. Reading the water was his alone. But he could pass on knowledge to others. Fishing knowledge from a past life. Where to cast, when to cast, how to read the wind and the waves, how to time it with the tides, how to gauge water temperature by its color. 1,000 little details that separate the master from the novice. The next day he gathered everyone together. Aunt Yoon, Park Chul, Aunt Yoon's grandchildren, even Grandpa Park. He stood on the pier and began to teach. He showed them how to look at the water. Where the surface ripples, there's a current beneath it. Where it's smooth, it's deep and still. Where seagulls circle, the fish are near the surface. Where birds sit on the water, it's shallow and the fish are at the bottom. He showed them how to cast the net, not with strength, but with technique. Wrist, elbow, shoulder, 3 points. Turn the wrist, release with the elbow, push with the shoulder. The net flies, opening up in a circle in the air. Beautiful, precise. Aunt Yoon tried it. Once, twice, 10 times. On the 20th cast, the net lay flat on the water. She looked at her hands as if they were someone else's. The grandsons picked it up faster. Boys. Flexible. Nimble. By evening, the oldest was casting as well as an adult. Grandpa Park watched and shook his head. He said they didn't teach that way in his day, that they taught with a stick on the back. Doyeon said a stick on the back doesn't work. Grandpa grunted but didn't argue. He taught them every day. In the mornings before heading to sea, 15 minutes, casting, reading the water, knots, repairing nets. 2 weeks later, Aunt Yoon was catching 30 fish a day, on her own, without his hints about the location of the schools. Pak Chul caught 40. The 2 grandchildren caught 20 between them. The village began to feed itself, not just because of his casting. This was more important than 60 silver coins. This was more important than the smokehouse and the pier. Because if he were gone tomorrow, the village wouldn't die. It would keep fishing. Worse off than with him. A little. But they would fish. They would live. He stood on the pier and watched as Aunt Yoon returned from the sea with a full net and sang. And he thought that this was the real catch. They came at night. 20 men, 4 boats. No crests, no insignia. But Doyeon knew whose they were. He woke up to the smell of smoke. Not from the smokehouse. Something else. Acrid. Hot. He rushed out of the house on his crutch. The smokehouse was on fire. Flames were bursting from cracks in the roof. Stones were cracking from the heat. Next to it, the drying shed was burning. The dry wood flared up like straw. He ran to the pier. The Sanwa Ho was floating in the water, intact. They hadn't had time or hadn't found it. But the 3 nets drying on the walls of the house were slashed. His new, large net. Aunt Yoon's net. Park Chol's net. Pieces of rope hung like the entrails of a dead animal. Byung-yong rushed out from his corner under the pier with an oar in his hand. No one. They were gone. The village was waking up. Screams. Children crying. Aunt Yoon stood in front of her net and said nothing. Her face was stony. Grandfather Park sat by the burning smokehouse and stared at the fire. His smokehouse. His stones. His work. Burning. Park Chol stood with his fists clenched and stared into the darkness of the sea. Min Soo ran from house to house, checking to see if anyone had been hurt. Sun Hwa stood in the doorway, holding a notebook with her notes. She pressed it to her chest, as if the notes were the most important thing. And she was right. The notes were important, because they contained evidence. Doyeon stood in the middle of the village and watched the fire. Anger rose inside, hot and dark. He clenched his fists. His knuckles turned white. Then he unclenched them. Anger won't help. Think. In the morning, he surveyed the damage. The smokehouse was half destroyed. The roof had collapsed. The walls were cracked from the heat, but the foundation was intact. The stones at the bottom had held up. Grandpa Park said the bottom row could be left as is. Take down the top and rebuild it. A week's work. The shed burned down completely. New wood. 3 days. The nets. That's the worst of it. His big net, which he'd spent a week weaving from hemp rope and sinew threads. Destroyed. Auntie's new net, which he'd bought for 12 copper coins. Destroyed. Pak Chi. Destroyed. Without nets, there is no catch. Without a catch, there is no food and no money. They knew where to strike. Not at people, at the tools. Destroy the tools, and the fisherman is dead. He sat on the pier and thought. He had 1 net left, a small one, his first, made from the tendons of a sea creature with his own knots. It was lying in the house. They hadn't found it, or hadn't recognized it. A small, unremarkable rag in the corner. He took it, went out to sea with Byung-yeon, cast it out. 50 mackerel. The small net couldn't hold any more. Brought it back, gave it out. The village ate. Then he began to weave. From morning till night, his fingers worked like a machine. Knot after knot, row after row. Min Soo brought him food. He ate with one hand and knitted with the other. Sun Hwa sat nearby and watched. Then she asked if she could help. He showed her a knot, a simple one, a basic one. She tried. Crooked. Again. Better. Again. By evening she was weaving slowly but steadily. 2 pairs of hands are faster than one. On the 2nd day, Aunt Yoon and her eldest grandson joined them. On the 3rd, Park Chul. His huge fingers were clumsy for the small knots, but he quickly learned to make a rough base into which Doyeon wove thin threads. By the end of the 4th day, they had 3 nets. Not as good as the ones that had been destroyed, but they worked. The smokehouse was rebuilt in 6 days. Grandpa Park was in charge. Park Chul carried stones. Aunt Yoon's grandsons handed him the mortar. Doyeon designed it. This time he did a better job. 2 chambers instead of 1. The left one for hot smoking, the right one for cold smoking. 2 chimneys, 2 temperature settings. Grandpa Park looked at the sketch on the ground and said he hadn't seen a smokehouse like this in 60 years. Doyeon said that was because no one had built one yet. While they were building the smokehouse and weaving nets, Doyeon went out to sea. He fished. He brought in the catch. He fed the family. He sold the fish. Not a single day missed. He slept 4 hours a night. He ate on the go. His leg ached constantly. He stopped noticing it. Min-soo noticed it. On the 5th day, she approached him in the evening. She said he was going to kill himself, that the human body isn't built for that kind of strain, that he needed a day off. He said he couldn't, that 12 people depended on him. She said 13 if you count him, and that a dead fisherman feeds no one. He looked at her. She looked at him through her crystal-clear glasses. Her eyes were serious. Her lips were pressed together. Her hands were folded across her chest. A dry, stern herbalist who weeps at night over the sick. He said, "All right, tomorrow is a day of rest." She nodded and left. The next day, he didn't go out to sea. He sat on the pier and mended his nets, slowly, without haste. Sonhwa brought him Min-soo herbal tea, bitter but warming. He drank and looked out at the sea and thought. The Che house had struck. It hurt, but it wasn't fatal, because they hadn't calculated it right. They thought a cripple on crutches would break under the weight of a single burned-down smokehouse. He didn't break. He rebuilt it, better than before. They'll strike again, harder. Maybe at people, maybe at the boat. He needs protection that can't be burned. He needs allies beyond Tolfo. He remembered Im Tae-il from Hwari. Tae-il sold seaweed. The Che family was putting pressure on him, too. He remembered the fishermen from other villages who had been starving for 3 years. He remembered Captain Birch. He remembered Emmy with her list of captains. He remembered Inspector Lee Da-hyun with his straight back and 3 bowls of fish soup. And he began to think on a larger scale. He started with Hwari. He went to see Tae-il at Songhwa-ho. He brought 10 smoked inhwa and a barrel of fresh horse mackerel. Tae-il met him on the shore. He looked at the fish. He tasted the inhwa. He was silent for a long time. Then he sat down on a rock and said that in 40 years of living on the coast, he had never eaten anything like it. Doyeon said the fish was free, that he didn't want silver, but a conversation. They sat on the shore for 2 hours. Doyeon explained. The Cho family is crushing everyone individually. Every village, every fisherman, every family. They come to one person. They make an offer. He refuses. A week later, his boat disappears. A month later, his family is starving. 6 months later, his name is forgotten. That's what happened to the fisherman from Songpo. That's what happened to dozens of others. It's easy to break one person. But if the villages unite, if they form a cooperative not of 12 people but of 50, 100, if they fish together, smoke their catch together, sell together, defend themselves together, then the Cho family won't be able to burn all the smokehouses at once, won't be able to cut all the nets in a single night, won't be able to intimidate everyone. Because when 30 fishermen stand shoulder to shoulder on the pier, it's no longer intimidation. It's war. And war costs money. And Dam Cho values money above all else. Tae-il listened. nodded, then said it was a good idea. But the fishermen are afraid. The fisherman from Songpo was afraid, and he was right to be. They found him. They took him out, quietly, no traces. Who can guarantee that the same won't happen to them? Doyeon said that the fisherman from Songpo was alone. Rich, but alone. He had a boat and money, but no one around him. And they won't be alone. There will be many of them, and they will have what Dam Chue doesn't have. Fish that no one else catches. Buyers that Dam Chue doesn't control. And knowledge of the sea that cannot be taken away. Taeil thought for a long time. He looked out at the sea. Then he said he would talk to the people in Hwari. He promised nothing, but he would talk. The handshake was firm. Doyeon drove on. In a week, he visited 4 villages: Hwari, Songpo, Chilbon, Namhari. Everywhere it was the same. Hungry fishermen, empty nets, torn boats on the shore, children with wide eyes and thin arms. Dam Chue buys up the little they manage to catch for a pittance. Whoever tries to trade on their own disappears. Whoever complains loses their boat. Whoever stays silent slowly dies of hunger. The silent famine is in its 3rd year. Everywhere he did the same thing. He gave out fish. For free. He didn't sell it. He gave it away. 5 smoked inghua to the village elder. 10 fresh horse mackerel to a large family. A barrel of salted mackerel to the widows. Then he would sit on the shore and mend the nets. Not just one, all of them that were brought to him. In Sanfo they brought him 11 nets, all in terrible condition. The reed fibers rotten to dust, the knots come undone, the mesh torn. He sat on the shore for 2 days and mended each one, with his own knots, the kind that don't come undone. The fishermen stood around and watched, in silence. When he finished and handed the first net back, the owner tugged at it. He tugged harder. He yanked with both hands. The knots held. He looked at Doyeon as if he were a man who had done the impossible. Because for a fisherman whose net had been rotting for 3 years, a new, sturdy net isn't just a thing. It's life. Doyeon demonstrated the knots. He showed how to cast. Not with strength, but with technique. Wrist. Elbow. Shoulder. 3 points. A flick of the wrist. A release with the elbow. A push with the shoulder. The net flies, opening in a circle in the air, and lands smoothly on the water. He showed how to read the signs, where to cast, when to cast, how to read the wind and the waves, how to determine the water temperature by the color of the surface. Dark green water is cold. Fish are down at the bottom. Light green is warm. Fish are higher up. Blue with white glints means it's deep and there are no small fish. Murky yellow means it's after a storm and the fish have scattered. 1,000 little details that distinguish a master from a novice. Every fisherman whose net he repaired would look at the knots and ask where he'd learned them. He'd say from a master. No one asked which one. 12 fishermen from 4 villages agreed to give it a try. Not a union, just an agreement for now, to sell fish together. Through Emmy. Through Western captains, bypassing the house of Cho. Doyeon didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for a share. He didn't ask for thanks. He asked for only one thing. If the house of Cho comes for any one of them, the rest won't stay silent. They'll come. They'll stand beside him, not with weapons, with boats, with nets, with their presence. 20 fishermen at the dock isn't the same as one. It's the difference between a victim and strength. Each of the 12 shook his hand. Each looked him in the eye. And in every gaze was the same thing: hope mixed with fear. He knew that feeling. He remembered it from his first day in this world, when he lay on a mat with a dead leg and didn't know what to do. Amy in Haejo worked without rest. Captain Birch sailed away with a hold full of fish and a promise to return in 3 months. As he left, he told Amy that no one in the Western market had fish like this, and that he would return with money and orders. But Amy had already found 2 other captains. A merchant from the Southern Empire, a broad-faced man with gold earrings and a loud voice. He traded in porcelain and silk. He didn't carry fish, but after tasting smoked inwa, he said he would convert half the hold into a cold storage room. A merchant from the Northern Kingdom, thin, pale, and silent. He bought medicinal ingredients. When Amy showed him the dried hemaconchs, he took out his purse and counted out 10 silver coins without haggling, because in the northern market, a single conch cost a gold coin. The channel was expanding. The Cho family hadn't seen this yet, or perhaps they had, but didn't grasp the scale of it, because they were used to thinking that fish meant volume. Thousands of bundles of mackerel and horse mackerel. But Doyeon wasn't selling volume. He was selling something no one else had, and it was invisible to the untrained eye. In the middle of the 2nd month, an event occurred that changed everything. Doyeon went out to sea as usual at dawn. Byung-young steered the Songhwa Ho northward along the coast, the usual route, and at the limit of his sonar range at a depth of 40 meters, Doyeon saw something impossible. A huge creature, long, perhaps 30 meters, maybe more, glowing, with a bluish-white light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It moved slowly along the bottom. Not a fish, too big for any fish, too bright for any living creature. It shimmered with the same bluish light as the Suryan spirit that had led him to the shore in the fog a month ago, but 1,000 times brighter, 1,000 times more powerful. He watched. Frozen at the bow of the boat, he watched with his inner vision. The creature moved northward, slowly, majestically, like a cloud beneath the water. A trail of light stretched behind it, wide, bright, and the fish followed this trail. Schools, dozens of schools, hundreds of species, as if the creature's light were drawing them in, as if it were creating a path along which the fish were returning home. A silver trail, not the artificial one that appears on a full moon. Another, alive, real, moving. The creature was the trail. The creature carried the trail within itself. He understood. This is the elder spirit Suryan, one of those spoken of in legends, the keeper of the trails, the one who guides the fish across the sea, the one who draws the currents and fills them with life. 3 years ago, the keepers went south, all of them, and the trails closed. The sea emptied. The silent famine began. And now one has returned. One of many, but he had returned. Why? He didn't know. But he knew what it meant. The fish are returning. Not because he's catching them, not because the system is working, but because the sea itself has decided it's time. He opened his eyes. His hands were trembling. Byung-young saw his face. pale, with wide eyes. He asked, "What?" Doyeon told him. Byungyeon listened. His weather-beaten face changed. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Then he turned toward the sea and was silent for a long time. Then he said that his grandfather had told him about the guardians, that to see a guardian is a sign, the greatest fortune and the greatest responsibility, that the guardian returns only when the sea feels that there is someone on the shore who is worthy, someone who is not greedy, someone who takes with respect, someone who returns what they have taken. He looked at Doyeon. He said that the sea had decided to change something, and that it had chosen him. Doyeon thought for 3 days. He walked along the shore, sat on the pier, lay awake at night, and on the 3rd day he made his decision. He would not fish on the guardian's path. He wouldn't intercept the schools the guardian led. He wouldn't cast his net into the silver trail the spirit left behind. Instead, he would catch the fish that strayed from the schools, the ones that had already left the path, the ones that scattered in the shallows after the guardian had passed, the leftovers, the scraps, the stragglers. What the keeper hadn't finished off. That would be enough, and the sea would see that he wasn't greedy, that he took only what fell into his hands on its own. He fished like this for 2 weeks, and every day the schools off the coast of Tulfo grew larger, not because of his cast, on their own. The fish were returning, not just to Tulfo, to Hwari, to Songfo, to Chilban, to Namhari. For the first time in 3 years of the silent famine, the sea along the eastern coast was teeming with fish again. The fishermen set out at dawn and returned with full boats by noon. What hadn't happened in 1,000 days happened in a single week. Aunt Yoon caught 50 fish a day. Park Chol caught 70. Aunt Yoon's grandchildren.
Hey, true fan, want videos YouTube will never see? Join me on Patreon, link in description.